Good evening and welcome to the Timberlane Regional School Board meeting of Thursday, May 17th, 2018. Mrs. Belcher, will you call the roll?
Brian Boyle.
Here.
Lee Doobie. Kim Farah.
Here.
Dan Guide.
Here.
Sarah McAmer.
Here.
Sean O'Neill.
Here.
Sue Sherman.
Here.
Jennifer Silva.
Here.
Kelly Ward. Seated at the board table this evening are the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Earl Metzler, and Student Representative Brian Lavoie. The presence of other district administrators as well as Timberlane Teachers Association officers will be reflected in the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Belcher. Eagle Scout Brian Lavoie, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our agenda this evening, we have minutes to approve of our May 3rd meeting. Should be there in your packet. Give you a second if you haven't already looked at them. Looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Sarah,
I'll second. Go ahead, Dan.
second from Dan. Comments, corrections, additions? Hearing no comments, questions, or additions, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes? Looks unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on. Eagle Scout, Mr. Lavoie.
So as I wasn't here last meeting, I have a little bit extra to kind of talk about tonight. Obviously, I think it's in the minutes, and I think you mentioned last meeting, but the reason I wasn't here, I was at the high school's production of Into the Woods. So that went very well. English. That went very well. It was really, really entertaining. We had a lot of people show up, so it was a good time. Just this Tuesday, we actually had the student elections for, class presidents and things like that. So I'm happy to announce as student council president and vice president, we have Isabella Foster and then Sophie Geisler. And then replacing me next year will be Nicholas Valhouli. He'll probably be at the last meeting of the year. I'll introduce him, do a little bit of, show and tell with him. These past couple weeks and also upcoming, we have a lot of different, the honor societies at the high school have their induction ceremonies. I know that the math, the foreign language honor societies, as well as a couple of the others have already had their induction ceremonies, but I know that a few are actually upcoming in the next couple weeks. We also have all of the concerts, band, orchestra, chorus, all coming up, the end of the year concerts coming up the end of May, beginning of June. The senior scholarship night, also the junior awards night, is happening June 5th, so that's, again, coming up around the corner. A lot of senior-related things. We have prom coming up tomorrow night. Cruise is a week from tonight, the senior cruise. And then the New Hampshire Scholar Dinner, Scholar Field Trip, which is actually a trip to the Fisher Cats game, will be in 2 Thursdays from now, on the 31st. So that's the New Hampshire Scholars Award is, certain seniors who achieve certain credits throughout their high school career, whether it is in STEM or in the arts. They're able to, get a day out of school, go down to a Fisher Cats game for the New Hampshire Scholars Award, which is really, really fun, a really good time. These past couple days, we actually had former Chief Justice of the New Hampshire Supreme Court, John Broderick, come down and do a little presentation on mental health awareness and REACT and things like that, sponsored by the Peer Outreach Group and some of the other student groups up at the high school, but he talked to the high school as well as, I think, the 7th and 8th grade up to middle school. And then I assume if you guys have looked at the website for the district, you've seen, but I'm going to mention it again because I think it's a really awesome thing. The New Hampshire State House Bicentennial Essay Contest. The state was just awarded, and we actually have a first or second place finisher in all 3 of the age categories. In the age 5 through 11 category, Michael Chambers won first place, and he's from, I believe, Atkinson. In the 11 to 14 age range, we have James Collins, who was second place for his age category. And then in the 15 to 21-year-old age category, we have Cam Magner of the high school, who got second place in his age category as well. So that was really, really, really proud to see every category represented by some Timberlane members. Today and tomorrow is actually the last of the 2 weeks of AP exams for the high school. So anyone taking AP exams, the last A couple tests are tomorrow. I believe human geography is the last one. So. Also, Sandown North will be having an Extreme Science Assembly May 23rd, and they'll have their first grade play upcoming in the beginning of June. Pollard just had a lip sync recently. I think it was May 11th, and then Danville had a State House Museum field trip kind of thing. The fifth graders on May 16th. I believe that is everything on my list.
That's quite a list. Thank you, Brian. And I don't mention it very much, but in our packet, we always have a beautiful report from the different schools with pretty pictures, and sometimes in the mess of all the papers we get, we don't get a chance to even acknowledge. We thank you for the work you do to put this together for us, so that we can read it at our leisure. But it's always nice to look at this and say, oh, they're doing that at the middle school, or oh, they're doing that at Sandown North, and be proud of the inspirational things we're doing. So I thank you all who participate in that. Thank you, Brian. Okay, we're at delegates and individuals. We have one this evening, Ryan Richmond. Good evening, Ryan.
Evening. Thank you. Good evening. Ryan Richmond, President of the Timberlane Teachers Association. I am happy and humbled to report, as I did a year ago, that as a result of this week's Timberlane Teachers Association elections, I have been reelected to a third term as president, and James Pelletier of Pollard has been elected as vice president. I look forward to advocating for the members of the Timberlane Teachers Association and for public education in the year ahead. Additionally, the district and school board were notified in writing on April 18th of the Timberlane Teachers Association's intent to negotiate, in good faith, a new collective bargaining agreement. Receipt of this notification was acknowledged that same day by Board Chair Susan Sherman. Thank you. Per Article 3.1 of the current collective bargaining agreement, a meeting between the district's negotiations team and the TTA team must take place within 30 days of receipt of that notification. At midnight tonight, that 30 days will have expired. No such meeting has taken place, nor has the TTA been contacted by the district or its representatives to schedule this first meeting. Thus, either willfully or neglectfully, the district is in violation of Article 3.1 of the collective bargaining agreement, and the Timberlane Teachers Association will be filing a formal grievance tomorrow morning. We are disappointed that the district's inaction has led to this, and look forward to the district taking corrective action on this issue. Thank you.
I
Thank you,
apologize for that on our behalf.
As do I.
Current business, tripod survey. This is a rather detailed, I believe, presentation, information, a lot of information here. Hope we can digest it all. Hang on to your questions till the end, and if there are things that we want to put on a future agenda where we take action on things, let's suggest a notice of that, but make sure it's noticed properly. So, thank you, Christy.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Christine Michaud, Director of Data Assessment and Accountability. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you this evening to share some information about the tripod survey as well as the 2018 results. So to get us started, just a reminder, and for those of you who might be new to the board, let me just tell you a little bit about what the tripod survey is. It's a student voice survey. It's the only tool that we're currently using in the district for student voice in this way. It's the survey is academic in nature. It reports from a student's perspective about teaching and learning. It was created by Dr. Ronald Ferguson of Harvard University back in 2001. In fact, it was the only survey that was found to be accurate and reliable and was used in the measures of effective teaching, the work of Bill and Melinda Gates, their foundation. Each of the surveys that are completed by a student pertain to a particular classroom. In just a minute, I'll tell you a little bit about the administration and then how students actually take the survey in their core classes as well as in their UAs. Each of the surveys is organized around 7 C's of effective teaching. Those 7 C's, let's see if I could get us to go to the next screen here. Let's see. There we go. 7 C's of effective teaching. Those are care, classroom management, clarify, challenge, captivate, confer, and consolidate. So students are answering some questions throughout the survey that pertain to those 7 C areas. This year's administration followed the holiday break. We administered the survey to our students in January. For our secondary students, they took one survey in a core class. So they might have taken a survey in their math class or in English, maybe a science or a social studies, and then they also took a survey for a UA class. And so again, that might have been art or music or maybe in PE. The questions in the survey are developmentally appropriate. It's a different survey for our lower elementary students than our upper elementary. So K2 students take a paper pencil survey, and upper elementary straight up through high school, that is a 3 through 12 online survey that our students participate in. And the survey takes approximately 30 minutes for students to complete. So there were several positive actions that took place over the course of this year. This is our 4th year of administering the survey. Our teachers are used to receiving the results. Our schools are. School data teams, district data teams, leadership teams at the schools. They're taking time to review the results and to set goals. You'll see there in just that first bullet point, one of the positive action steps that took place as early as last spring when we received last year's results. Schools identified and focused on at least one of the 7 C areas. We asked the schools to be very specific about thinking about particular strategies that can be implemented as a school as a whole, or specific strategies that individual classroom teachers might like to implement. And so each of our schools did that. They identified at least one of the 7 Cs. Some of our schools even identified more than one 7 C area that their staff, teachers, and other staff were committed to work on. So we did see positive increases in scaled scores that resulted from that targeted focus and those positive changes that were made both at the school level as well as individual classroom teachers making changes to their practices in the classroom based on the results that they received. Also, for us this year, a superintendent's leadership team participated in instructional rounds. That process allowed for the superintendent's leadership team to present to each school a unique report. That report, those reports, I should say, they're posted on the school district website. And each of those reports is unique. It's based on the observations that we discovered in visiting classrooms. Boy, I think, gosh, over that month's time, we visited over 100 classrooms. Each of the schools, we talked about the observations that we found, and we also made recommendations in those reports for next steps for both classrooms as well as school-wide to help us to improve in the 7 C areas. So the tripod score reports give you a little information about that before we look at the data. The score reports range from scores of 202 up to 398. So your highest score would be 398 and a lowest score of 202. Based on national norms, a targeted score or a midpoint average would be at 300. A score of greater than 320 would be an above average score. You'll notice that those are color-coded there on the next few charts. Anything that shows up in that dark green is that above average score of 320 or greater. Midpoint, you'll see that in the lighter green. And any score that might have been less than 280 overall would be in a below average score in an area where our schools are paying some particular attention to setting goals for the upcoming school year. The The tripod themselves will provide the teachers with access to their own personal results. So at this point, teachers are getting those reports directly from tripod for their particular classrooms. Our administrators, or at a school level, we receive our district level, we receive school level results only at this time. I should also mention that schools will actually receive a school level report if at least 10 surveys were completed in that school. So I should give you heads up now that you will not see school level results for Sandown Central. Sandown Central School has less than 10 surveys that are completed. So we don't receive school level results for Sandown Central, but individual teachers still receive their reports there. All right, so here, the first slide, you see tripod district summary. See there, each of the 7 Cs, again, starting with care, and then in the second table, you'll see the last 4. Start with our K2 survey results. A couple of above average areas, 1 below average for K2, and then you'll see that we have 4 areas in that second table of average scores. 3-5 district-wide results. You'll see that in our second row of both tables. You will not see that we have school-wide results for our middle school. And I'll talk with you a little bit about that next. And then below that, our high school reports are at average and above average for each of the 7 C areas. So let me tell you a little bit about why we were unable to receive school-wide results this year for our middle school. And when we receive our reports, we receive reports that include what is called an adjusted score. And in order to receive an adjusted score, the students in the school, all students, would need to have completed the characteristic type questions. Those might also be known as demographic type questions. You can see that in my last bullet point, those questions there might be just a few samples. Are you a girl or a boy? How many books are there in the room where you sleep? How many adults do you live with? Does your family speak English at home? Thousands of students nationwide are responding anonymously to a handful of questions on the tripod survey. That allows tripod to use their methodology to norm the data. Without the ability to norm the data, tripod is unable to send us school level results. Now, the individual teachers will receive results, but without answering those characteristic type questions, teachers and schools are not getting the most precise feedback. That whole methodology is a bit of a sort of a technical and complex topic for me to sort of sit and describe to you. So a couple of bullet points there that might help you to better understand. The whole lots of research behind data tells us that even when quality teaching remains constant, the class characteristics can impact how students respond to questions. And so what tripod does is they use a methodology that removes the impact of certain characteristics from the results that are reported to the teacher and to the school. So again, because we had students that did not respond to the demographic questions on the tripod survey this year, we are unfortunately not able to report middle school scores. We do not have them. Again, that would be just school level results. Our individual teachers were able to receive their results, the raw data. All right, so the next slide here shares with you results of Timberlane Regional High School with average to above average scores in each of the 7 C areas. I want to point out to you, Consolidate was an area that the high school where they focused this year. That was their targeted area, and you can see that as a result of the efforts at the high school and by our classroom teachers, that particular scale score went up 6 points. Next is Danville Elementary. For each of our elementary schools, I'll share with you the K2 scores and then 3-5. So here we have, again, each of our 7C areas. I'm showing you the last 3 years. So 2016 score, 2017 score, and then 2018 score. Clarify was a particular area of target or focus for Danville School. You can see there they had some huge gains from 260 to 290. That was nice to see. Grades 3 through 5. Again, their school-wide focus area was Clarify, and though we see a score that is still a bit below average, we do see that there was some nice gains in that area from last year to this year. Pollard School. Pollard School had a couple of focus areas this year, again, as a result of the positive work that's happening and the analysis of the tripod data. You can see that, again, we've had some nice gains. The area of Captivate had a nice 10-point gain, and classroom management went up at Pollard School as well. Pollard 3-5. Next is Atkinson Academy. Atkinson Academy focused this year school-wide. Target area was Challenge. Again, take a look at those great results. An overall score last year of 304 and up to 326 this year. 3-5 scores. Sandown North. Sandown North grades 1 and 2. Consolidate was their area of focus. 6-point increase there for the lower elementary of Sandown North. Grades 3-5. Again, Consolidate was that area of focus for them, and you can see that that area was increased from last year. Though still below average, we're seeing some nice increases based on the targeted work that's happening in our classrooms and school-wide. So what are we looking, that's school-wide results. So at this point, I want to share with you what are some of the data-informed action steps that are taking place now as we prepare for the upcoming school year. So as I said, each of the classroom teachers, they have received their data. School-wide results have also been shared. Staff meetings and professional learning communities, our PLCs, leadership teams have also spent some time with the data. And our schools are planning for improvement strategies and practices for the upcoming school year. They're thinking about reflecting on this year's action plans, but also implementing action plans for the upcoming school year. We're using our results to identify areas for professional learning. Individual teachers are using their data for some personal goal setting. And with regard to our instructional rounds practice, we are using this year's results to think about those problems of practice that we'll focus on for the upcoming school year. The instructional rounds process will be performed again next year by the superintendent's leadership team. And many of our schools have actually, they have also shared with us that they're very much interested in going through that instructional rounds process themselves as a school-wide team. So that was great for me to hear. In fact, others, some of those schools are interested in sort of visiting each other's schools, which is great in terms of colleagues giving feedback to each other. And then certainly we use data for assisting in our resource allocation as well. And that is tonight's presentation.
Questions about that got triggered by the presentation? Danny?
I have a question. Atkinson Academy K through 2. What caused the big drop in Captivate? Do you know, or is it what you're going to investigate, or you know what I mean? Like, because obviously that was one of the biggest drops, and it's going to ebb and flow, right? But
Sure, of course, yeah.
that just seemed like it was a lot to me.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that is part of the data analysis. That's part of the work that's being done at the schools, right? Is to ask those questions. We go through a data protocol that we use pretty continuously and regularly in our schools, where we're observing the data. We're not only we really begin with predictions. Before we've even had a chance to look at the data, we're predicting what we might see. Then we're making observations about our data, and then we start to make some inferences. Why do we think we see what we see, both good and bad, right? And then we spend quite a bit of time thinking about implications of practice. If this is something that we're seeing, we think it might be caused by X, what might we be doing, differently? What steps might we take to actually get a different outcome? And so that is an important part of sort of an ongoing data process in our schools.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Jen?
So you said at least 10 surveys need to be completed to get a school?
To get a school level report, yes.
So when we talk about the middle school, if they had at least 10 surveys complete, then there would have been a
School level report. But the reason, so it was a different reason that we didn't receive school level reports at the middle school. And that was because some students answered demographic questions, others did not. So they were not able to provide us with those adjusted scores, which
So
are
even if we
scores that are
had
based
10,
on norm references.
you wouldn't have, even if you had 10 complete, you
Even if we
still
had
wouldn't
10
have.
complete, yes, which is true. We had well more than 10 completed there.
Oh, yes, Kim.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
What's the margin of error here? 300 is not an absolute. What is the margin of error? Is it a plus or minus 5, plus or minus 3? Because when you look at a jump of 5 points, is that significant or is it not?
I could not tell you off the top of my head what the margin of error is for the scores, but that's certainly something that I could look up and get back to you on.
Okay, great.
So let's put that on our list, action item list. Let's just, what the margin of error is. I had a question about how does each school, I'm sorry, Kim, you had a second question. I'm sorry.
I did. I probably have 5 questions. Is that okay?
Can I ask mine and then come back to you? Okay. So how does each school, Christy, choose their focus area? And do they, then it's a two-part question. And do they choose K through 2, a particular area, and 3 through 5, or they choose one area that goes K through 5?
Yeah, so, we would probably, want to talk to the individual schools about how they go about doing their area, or selecting their area. But I encourage them to use the data, right? I mean, we have a lot of data available to us in our district, and data-informed decision-making is really our practice. And so, you're looking at results. If you found that in a particular area, say K2, you might have had a stronger skill set than, or a stronger score than another, perhaps then the school might decide on a couple of focus areas. I do know that at least one of our elementary schools did choose a couple of focus areas last year. Others, had made more of a decision to be very targeted and very specific to just a single area.
Yeah, though part of the school improvement planning process, when they write their school action plans, we encourage them. But it's very similar to how we, with individual teachers, it's really a self-reflect, self-select. So each school has a leadership team, and they look, and it's not, they don't necessarily just take the lowest score and decide what that's going to work on. They think of a theme. They embed it in their school action plan, and then they obviously work through their teaching teams or however their individual buildings are run, and go from there. So I think there's some autonomy there. I think each site, I think there's a lot of investment from the classroom. I think the student voice it helps them pick on it. And during our visits, just a side note, during our visits, it was very clear what they were working on. You hear the language, you hear the vocabulary. If it's about consolidation, you hear them talk about we're consolidating and what are we doing, and the students will give that kind of feedback back. So I thought it was pretty powerful. I thought the process was very solid. We didn't micromanage the process. We let the building leaders with their teams figure that out. But we were very impressed when the superintendent's leadership team went in with our instructional rounds. So thank you.
Kim, back to you for another question.
Can I ask more than one or just one?
Well, Jen had her hand up. It's just,
Okay,
I was
so,
just trying to be fair.
You said greater than 320 is above average. What does that mean? Does it mean the top 10%, the top 25%, anybody who's at 51%? What does that mean in terms of above average? Is there a percentile? Do you understand what I'm?
I do, right. And so, again, I would think that some of your questions, margin of error, percentile, that would be more, detailed information that I did not bring to the presentation this evening, but certainly something that I would be more than willing to look into for you. I can tell you that greater than 320, so any score that would be 321 up to 398 would be considered, based on national comparisons, would be an above average score. To say that they've taken their scores and aligned them with a percentile ranking, I'm sure that they have. It's not something that, again, that I was prepared to bring with me this evening.
And so we can add that onto the list.
And just to add to that, I think Dr. Farrow would ask the next question, it might be one of your questions, the cut scores, how have they changed at all? There was some change from the initial year to the second year, which made the comparison year to year. I felt it was null and void, but difficult. They tried to do some sort of conversion. It didn't mean a whole lot, I didn't think, to us.
Not that first year I didn't.
No, so they made some changes. So I think they've been pretty consistent with the cut scores. I think those are good questions
They're good
for,
questions,
more technical in nature, I think.
Kim, go ahead if you have something else.
We have the contracts here, and they say that we've signed a contract for next year already and for the subsequent year.
So they're in our packets.
So did we budget for that, for 2 years of a tripod contract in 1 year?
It is budgeted for the upcoming school year, yes. The
So we
tripod
put 2
survey is.
years of the tripod survey into the budget for the upcoming school year.
We've signed a contract for the pricing, to log in the pricing for the deal that we were able to get. Our contract is not to purchase 2 years upfront. The contract is the contract was. To answer your question, yes, the contract was set for 2 years. It is budgeted next year.
So both years are budgeted in next year's budget.
No.
Yeah.
They're paid for.
Single year.
Some
Year at a
contracts
time.
we have, like, for instance, we get an option sometimes, and I know you know this, but just if people are confused, sometimes we get an option to pay 3 years all in 1 year.
Right.
Similar to some other vendors that we use. This particular one, and I'm confident that we will have that money in the 1920, I'll be able to find that money in the 1920 budget. It's part of our instructional tools.
So we're not
would
going to
agree.
pay the second year out of the upcoming year budget.
If you direct us to, we will.
I'm just wondering also why, in the past, we've done a 1-year contract, and now we're doing a 2-year contract. And
We've-
it's especially a little surprising to me, given the fact that this happened, this contract was signed the end of December. The previous year was signed the middle of May, and this was signed right after we had a discussion regarding some issues that the Department of Education had regarding tripod, and I remember from our conversations on the board that we were going to take a look at whether or not we could continue tripod in its current form or not, or, and I'm not saying that I'm in agreement with this, or whether we were going to continue to use tripod. So it's very surprising to me that we
think
now
that's
have a
entirely-
2-year contract.
I don't think that's entirely accurate. Those communications from the Department of Ed were in late January. Those were not in December.
And I would say, if I may, that Mrs. Armfield, she had been involved with the previous contracts. December was my first opportunity working with Tripod. It was also the time that I was in constant contact with them in preparation for our administration in January. So those conversations were, they were ongoing throughout the month of December, with me and Tripod. I didn't have the history, that Mrs. Armfield did in terms of previous contracts, negotiations and things.
And the board doesn't select instructional tools. The administrative staff selects the instructional tools. This is an instructional tool.
Jen, you had a question?
No, I'll let Sean go.
Okay, Sean?
The point that I have a problem with this is that from the December 21st meeting of the school board, is that it was said, other business, agenda items requested for the January 4th meeting, including a proposal for the removal of tripod survey and Achieve 3000, and a posting of meeting Vimeos. And that's the, from the minutes. I find it disingenuous, to put it that way, is that on 12/28, a contract was signed with Tripod when it's well known that this board wanted to discuss this matter. If I can't walk away from this without thinking that this was railroaded through the district to bypass the school board, even to get buy-in. I mean, how does one walk away from that, Dr. Metzler, with a different thought?
You feel your thoughts are your own. Feel free.
Could you
let's move on.
explain why, I mean, the 21st and then the 28th?
We already, I'll take that in two parts. First of all, Achieve 3000 was already paid all the way through next year.
I'm not talking about that, more or
You
less.
did, you brought them both up. You were
Well, I'm
talking
reading
about.
from the minutes, I was more
Well,
focused on the tripod.
you brought them both up, so I said I'd take them both. So the first part is that's already paid for all through next year, so that was irrelevant. And so the other part about this is we select instructional tools and we do renewals and we work on pricing and they give us breaks at different times during the year. So, you can use your railroad theory if you want, and I can say it's a coincidence and we can walk away and disagree. Okay?
Well, I actually have evidence right here that there was a conversation by a resident that actually contacted the people from Tripod, and it's actually started on out by a conversation unsolicited to Tripod by this district. And it's, the one that's presenting here this evening is the one that reached out, and I do believe that most likely that was at your direction.
Well, yeah,
So
I had
did
every
you
intention of using
instruct
this.
her to contact Tripod and to get this contract?
Do I want you to answer that question? You can answer.
Absolutely. I direct everybody to do the work in this district.
Okay, so the buck does stop at your desk. So why did you decide to do that when this board wanted to have a
I'm not
discussion?
going to turn this into a congressional hearing. I have every intention of using this tool, instructional tools. Administrative staff selects instructional tools. I've selected this tool. We're using it. It's very much a part of what we do. And we decided to renew, and we renewed the contract for 2 years, next year and the following year.
Jen, you're all set, Jen. Kim?
No, I'll ask my question.
Sarah's got her hand up, and so does Kim, so go ahead, Jen.
So, why was it just the middle school that didn't answer those questions?
I can answer that. That was the last school, and so we were in the process of working with the Department of Education, and in good faith, we said, listen, and Kim knows this because I talked to her about it. I've never even looked at the background information, so I had wondered, they kept talking about it may have an impact on your scores. They weren't as clear as the fact that we wouldn't get scores, I don't believe, but.
They weren't at the time when I asked.
At the time, because I asked Chrissy to research it. But I said, if these are the questions that people are hung up on, and we don't use them for anything, I'm like, well, don't answer them then. Get the information that we use to improve teaching and learning in the district, and that's what we do. Right?
So what are we doing going forward? Because it seems like it's not worth spending the money on if we're not going to get results.
Well, it's true. We would probably, if we had to do that all over again, I would have just said, just give the survey like you did every other school and get the scores. We'll deal with it later. It's a jurisdiction issue in terms of who can tell us what and when. But that being said, we were trying to be cooperative, so I said, as we look at our acceptable use policy and opt-in, this will be part of our opting in the fall, when parents opt in to both the use of our internet. There's several other things they have to opt into, right?
That's part of the InfoSnap.
So this survey will be opt-in moving forward.
Everything will be part of that one. I think correct me if I'm wrong, there's a little drop-down.
I'm just
so-
asking about this. This will be an opt-in moving forward.
Yeah, there'll be like a little, there'll be a line say that, I think tripod, and then there'll be, what are the other things? Is Ken here?
Yeah, food service, the food service policy, internet usage.
Yeah, there's little drop-downs, yes or no. They say yes or
They're
no.
all yes and no. type
So they're
of
you opt into all of them.
And so then will parents get the letter home that it's going to be, when it's going to be administered?
Well,
when the test would be?
we always do that.
And so if they want to see the survey, they can still see it?
Yes,
And if they
absolutely.
choose after seeing it to change their mind and opt out, will that still be an option?
Or
They'd have to
vice
contact.
versa? Or vice versa after they've seen the survey?
Always willing to sit with a parent and review those types of things, absolutely.
Sarah?
So you've now used this tool over 4 years, and so I'm just curious, what additional tools are you kind of using in conjunction with this as you get the results and the schools are able to identify the aspect that they're going to focus on? Are they then going out and are you looking for additional instructional tools to kind of build on that, or how? If this is just like a base to kind of give you an area of focus, how do you build off of that to kind of
Well,
achieve
can I-
that goal?
Yeah, that whole self-reflect, self-select, our entire professional development plan in the district is built off the feedback from students.
Okay.
You know, that's why we select instructional tools to use, and that's why we build, so we don't just randomly have people tell us, don't use this, use this. I mean, it's part of a comprehensive plan to improve teaching and learning in the district.
Right.
So everything that she plans comes out of the data that we collect.
Does it help you identify which tools are working and which ones aren't? Maybe you need to reevaluate?
Right,
or-
and that's actually, I'm glad you asked that question, because that is part of the data analysis work that we do. Our data teams, our leadership teams, don't sit with a single data source. They sit with a variety of data points, and they look for those connections and the patterns and the trends, and ask themselves the difficult questions about, how are things relating? What do we need to change here? Is there another data point that shows us that this is, this particular area is of concern in our school? Again, that's not just as it relates to, it relates to this student voice survey. It relates really to all of our academic survey, our social emotional behavioral, attendance, all those data points. We talk about a triangulation and making sure that, when we're making a decision, that it's not made on any one single point, but really, based on what our patterns and trends have been over time.
Great, okay.
You're all set, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Kim, back to you.
Now, are you now taking this data and analyzing it against academic performance? Because I've looked at the Department of Ed report cards for the school by grade level, by test. And of course, now I don't know what the margin of error is here, so I can't really make a determination. Academically, from last year to this year, we're stable, okay? But you're saying this is going way up in most cases, based on what I'm looking at, my analysis, just quickly, that this is going up. So it seems to me that the two should be rising together, and they're not. So that's kind of, it's surprising to me. What are your thoughts on that?
I think those are questions that we'll continue to ask. They're the ones that we ask ongoingly. I have a lot of faith in our well-trained, teams at the schools. Really over the last few years, the way in which our teams are looking at data, making use of data, coming to a data conversation with questions in mind. I think that we'll be answering those questions ongoingly.
But to your point, it's a single data point. This is how the students feel. This is how the customers feel about teaching and learning. And just because we get better at care doesn't necessarily mean, because we show them that we care more and we're more compassionate, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to score higher on a test at some standardized test, right? This is a climate and culture thing too. It's a teaching and learning
But if you change the climate and culture,
over time.
over time,
Yep,
you
you don't blink your eyes, and just because you got better at consolidation, that the scores definitely went up,
Right, so, and that's my point here, just because these scores, this is not a trend over time. I mean, you're looking at, and again, I can't make a determination because I don't know what the margin of error is here, but basically, I'm looking for trends here. I'm not looking at just two data points, I'm looking for a trend. So I've looked at data over the last several years. And yes, it's not about just standardized testing, but we know in this day and age, there's a lot to be said for what the standardized test scores are, because that's what people look at, because it's a data point, and it's probably one of the most important ones. So that's what I have to use. I can't just, you know.
No, and I don't disagree with you at all, at all. You know, it's obviously, our hope is that as we strengthen some of these areas, consolidation, you know, captivate, clarify, that will happen, that will resonate itself to SAT scores, to AP scores, those over time. Now, again, when you're looking at 3 different second grades, you're looking at 3 different groups of kids, right?
Right.
Maybe not even the same teachers.
They're
Well,
not
right,
the
but-
same
Right, so there's
second
some
grades.
yeah, it's not the same second grade. Maybe might be the same second grade teacher in a particular school, or the same group of teachers in a K to 2 or 3 to 5, but we're looking at different groups of kids, you know, so, and their perspective on how they feel, you know, I'm not gonna tell them they feel wrong, this is the feedback they're giving us, right? So, is it improving teaching and learning? I believe through instructional rounds and through many different ways that we're going to continue to work on that and hopefully see those trends resonate to the numbers that you're talking about, right? So it's a little bit of a leap, and I get the margin of error question that you're asking as to what's this data mean in comparison to that data, right? I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done with that. It's not as easy to say, oh, that number went up, so everything's great. It's much more complicated than that, and I know you know that. Yeah, I know the point you're making. So that's not lost on us, I think, through curriculum and assessment. I think, you know, and working with the building level data teams and those sorts of things, it takes some time. This is not a 1, 2, 3 year thing. This is a much bigger.
Right, and this is the 4th year, right?
Yeah, but I remember that first year, I'm not convinced that very first year, the data changed. So you're seeing you start seeing 3 years there. That first year, they changed the way they reported out the data. So I saw some convenient leaps in terms of connecting dots there, and I'm not quite sure I agreed with that initial data. The survey changed.
These 3 years, they've used the same.
Yes.
Okay, right. I've got a question for Kim, and I'll come back. Kim, so what's the time or the length of years that you would consider then a reasonable trend to analyze data? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 4 years, 3 years? You talk about the number of years, so I was wondering what.
It would depend on what the data is. If
Okay.
I'm measuring changes in geologic time, it would be eons.
Right, we're not-
If I'm
right,
measuring, you know, which data specifically are you asking about?
When you say trends and you talk about time, I just wondered what would trigger it to be the correct amount of time for this type of data,
For this data,
for this kind
this
of data?
particular data, or different? You
This-
have to specify what data you're
this
talking
data.
about. This data? Well, it would depend on whether or not, as you said, your test changed. It would depend on what your variables are within your testing here, you know? You'd have to make some determinations based on that. What's a trend? Frankly, as a scientist, I want at least 5 points for a trend.
Yeah, that's what I was
When I'm
looking for
doing
you to say,
assessment,
5.
5. So you were telling me 4, but now it's 3. So my concern in this district, from what I've seen, because I've been following it for 12 years, my daughter's graduating, so, is that it's always a moving target. I doubt there's one thing other than the New Hampshire DOE data that I can point to that has a 5-year trend since I've been here in this district watching scores. The SATs have changed, right?
But
The
we didn't
kneecaps have
change
gone
the
away? No, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I
things that-
can't find 5 years of data to pin my head on other than the New Hampshire DOE, and that's why I go back to that.
Well, we've tried to, and I agree with you, 3 to 5 years, change in practice, and I think we both know how to prove that what you changed truly had an impact on the outcome. Not conveniently, not a coincidence, this change created this result. That's a dissertation, that's a lot of work, I think, but we still analyze data, but I think we've tried to present stable data to look for data points like that, like the STAR assessment, and then with this data, other data, the AP data, although they changed the AP tests, we've tried to, because that was a complaint of the board, they were presenting scores differently. When I first got here, every year it was presented differently, and nobody, well, last year I had this, and this year I have this, it doesn't, You know, so we've tried to do that, and we've actually even tried to show the boxes of the same kids. Like we said, remember, this group was this last year, they're this year, next year they're this group. So, I agree, we're trying to stabilize some, but the state changes every year. I mean, in terms of accountability, I struggle with the fact that some districts are allowed to not be part of the accountability system or choose their own. That makes no sense to me, you know.
Well, it's hard to compare community to community then.
Yeah,
It's like-
you know what I mean? I think everybody should be part of the same accountability system. I don't think you should be able to pick the one that you like, and then change it 2 years later because maybe it didn't yield the kind of results you were hoping for, or whatever you have a change in leadership, the board changes, you change the way you're doing your work, but, we've tried to present that data, at least that's, I can tell you, that's been our efforts, is to try to keep, so you have the same kind of numbers to compare to the next year. Right, the things that we control, and then there's things that we don't control. And I get frustrated by it as well, you know, because that's what we're looking at, and then you say, wait a minute, that doesn't, now next year we're doing what? Now, you know?
Okay, we've been on this topic quite a while, so unless it's new information or a new question, Sean?
Yeah, what is since there was some issues in regards to people opting, you know, their child and were out of the survey, what was the participation rate
98.5%,
across the?
Across the district.
All eligible students, so 98, so.
1.5% opted out.
Okay.
Something else? Yes, Jen?
Yep, I actually have two questions. So the kids have been taking this for a while. Is there a way that Tripod identifies, I don't want to say students who answer
They have no,
Be
can I
not
answer
quite
I think what
truthfully.
your question is? There's no way to identify which student answered any of these questions.
That's not, well, that was part of my second question, but I have a middle schooler. I talk to a lot of middle schoolers. And the feedback from quite a few of them that I got was that some of them just answered the most outlandish way that they could answer.
That's the margin of error part.
Well, this
So is there a
Kim's
way
margin.
to?
Well, it's like the Bass survey, if you know the Bass behavior, I don't know if you, but the questions are all jumbled. There's no way that they could manipulate the results of this. You know, even if they answered, and I don't know what they throw out in terms of margin of error. I'm not sure what the answer to that is. But I can tell you that even if you tried to answer a certain way, it's just like the Bass survey, in my opinion, the valid and reliable survey, that there's questions in there that they don't even use at all. So some of those crazy answers to questions that they're just in there as placeholder, they don't even really use that information. Is that?
So, yeah, and to get what you thought I was going toward, which was actually part of my second question, and I know you say there's no way to know, but when you talk about anonymity in surveys, just like we talked about, I think last time this board met with evaluations, when you said it is human nature, and the problem with being anonymous is that people do try and figure out who answered what way.
Yeah, I think.
Beyond that, K through 2, they're not taking it themselves, correct? They have a staff member doing it with them? Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's not
being
really
administered by
anonymous
somebody
if
other than the class
somebody is,
Yeah, I would.
First, yeah, it's,
But I would say in terms of to the anonymity, thanks, to the anonymity of it, right? Now, I would say the commitment of the district and the president's here from TTA, like, I can tell you that I have not, I could grab any one of these if I want. I have not looked at an individual teacher's survey results since we've been doing this. Now, the first board, when we first talked about this, the board was like, you're gonna bring all those results back to us, individual results. And I'm like, no, we're not. No, we're not. These are going back to the teachers individually. They self-reflect and self-select. You may read some things on it that you don't like, and you might read some things that you absolutely love. But I don't think, I know that they can't, there's no way of telling who filled out what survey. I know that. And like I said, I don't even, we've used it at the building and the district level. We've talked to the TTA a little bit about, hey, would you be comfortable if this were part of some sort of evaluation? And that's just discussion. But, we obviously have another district, Hampstead is now adopting this. They have some similar questions about, is this going to be used against us? No. We're using this to improve the climate and culture in the district. There isn't anything negative coming out of this other than, you look at your scores, you say, wow, those are some things we need to work on. But I don't even think there's anything really in there as a teacher, like unless you told me I didn't care. like, if all the kids said you didn't care, that, you know, that may sting a little bit, but, you know, but you might be really challenging. You might be like, wow, they don't think I care, but they think I'm very challenging. So I think there's positives or negatives to be drawn from it, but I don't think that I haven't heard a single time where, I don't know, you correct me if I'm wrong, where a teacher felt like I'm gonna figure out which kids, and so I know I said that about self-evaluate, you know, you read comments and they feel how they feel, but
Well, and they're
This
getting
is-
a summary report. They're not getting a
don't
report
see
based on
individual-
individual
right.
student responses.
yeah, I
It's a
think,
summary.
A teacher sees it at the summary level.
and I just wanted
They
to
don't- They
valid,
don't see
You don't
the
see that.
individual.
No.
See,
no, it doesn't
the kid
say-
that used this computer said this about you, Mrs. Sherman. I don't see that.
Right.
You see a summary of you're challenging, you're
Yeah.
captivating, you're not.
In your overall scores.
yeah, and I just wanted something valid and reliable to get student voice. That was really the motivator behind this at the beginning. Like, let's find out how the kids feel about teaching and learning, and let's see if we can do some things to make them, you know, feel differently or improve the climate and culture with teaching and learning. So it gives us a tool to get the kind of work started. I think the real work really is more around the instructional rounds. This just helps start the conversation, gives them an area to focus on. I don't know, I find it to be pretty valuable, and I don't think it's the most important thing that we use, but I do think it's an important thing that gets the work started. The work kind of grows from there, and the students know that we're listening. So you could say, why don't we just have not you, but you could just say, why don't you just have a survey and they can fill out whatever they want, but it wouldn't be valid and reliable, you know, in terms of trying to capture some data. So that's all. That's the only reason.
All right, thank you, Christy, very, very much.
Very welcome.
I'm sure we'll see you again. We've got some policies in front of us. The leave for first read. Who's presenting these? Danny?
Lee's not here, I'm not gonna present them, but who else is on policy? Jen?
Yeah,
Jenny, you presenting them then?
I didn't know I was, but.
Do you feel like you can?
I don't have any of my notes from policy committee, but
Can I make my motion first? And then-
Sure.
I'd like to motion for first read policies BG, BGA, BGB, BGC, DJE, IHCA, IMG.
Second.
And then I do have, well, Jen can present and then I'll ask a question.
okay, so BG, BGA, BGB, BGC, those, Dr. Metzler, you're with me, right?
Yeah.
So those, we just reaffirmed.
Well, you would know,
There
you
were
were,
no changes for
Yeah.
those, right?
yeah, either you or Lee, or both of you, noticed that there was some policies that weren't reaffirmed, right? Wasn't that the? Because you kind of he went through and created a whole database of all,
Oh, he
and he's
did?
looking at what needs to be done.
Sounds like.
Was it 3 years or 5 years? Yeah.
Well, 5 years, and what we were noticing that some of them had revised dates that looked kind of old, but that didn't necessarily mean that they hadn't been looked at because they didn't have a reaffirmed date. So we were looking at putting the reaffirmed date on them as we go through, so that when we look back, we can see which ones.
You already looked
Yeah, I
at it.
think we concluded that they were reaffirmed, but they didn't write, that wasn't on there, right? That they had been looked at and nothing was
Right.
changed, so the date was updated, but there wasn't anything on some of them, right?
So,
that
but
right?
those 1, 2, 3,
Is it four?
4,
That was
yes.
the first 4.
I think we just said, okay, let's reaffirm those 4. There were no changes.
So there was no updates to it.
Right.
No changes, no, yeah. Okay. How about the next one? How about the bidding requirement one?
The bidding requirement one, the first part, to change the purchases from 1,000 to 5,000. To get 3 documented quotes, because 1,000 felt like you could really just
Right.
very quickly and easily.
Your versions have it in blue, right?
Right,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Could be paper.
Yeah, or just even some office, a few office supplies. And then included on the district website, I think was just to add that third place to advertise bids.
That's good.
I have comment on this one.
Sure.
I have the New Hampshire School Board model policy here
For this particular one?
for this
Yeah.
particular one. And this was before our board before, and, yes, it was.
Okay.
It was, and it had been approved by policy committee and come before the board. And we had changed it so that all bids must be submitted in sealed envelopes addressed to the board and plainly marked. And it says the board reserves the right to reject any or all bids. Jen, did your committee look at the model policy for this?
I don't think we had the model policies out when we went over them.
We talked about that, and we thought how impractical that would be. We had that discussion.
I do remember asking that question, yes.
You take it back and clarify it, if you want to.
Because ultimately, it's the board that enters into,
Yeah, but we're not
contracts.
buying paper, and we're not
this is
looking
for-
at the bids for WB Mason versus Staples for paper, are
I
we?
think that would be more a quote than a bid. That this is speaking to the bid, you're speaking about the bids.
This is bids, over 5,000.
We'll send it back. You want to have it clarified, we'll have it clarified. Brian, what do you think?
I'm just curious, you might want to send it back to policy, because I'm just wondering if there might be something in the audit report that's, wasn't there something they were talking about bidding?
It said that we should look at all policies, and it mentioned some, and this gets into that 3 to 5 year range. So they were like, I know the last time was the 14, so now we're in 18. Next year will be 19, so we're outside the 5 years. So they said we should be looking at these, and obviously they're looking at the financial ones. I think, Jen, if you remember the conversation we had, hopefully maybe this will jog what we talked about. I gave the example of the athletic trainer's bid, and that was like in like the high 30s or whatever when I first started, and I kept bringing it to the board, and the board kept sending it back to me, and they said, no, that's your job. Right? So, and so we still bring the big ones to you, the bus transportation, the transportation, the food service, the really, really big ones, but these smaller ones we thought, and I can't remember the example that we gave. Jeff, was it computers or something, or it was some sort of purchase that we would make?
I remember when I asked that question about the superintendent reserves the right to reject any or all bids and to accept that bid which appears to be in the best interest of the district. I know I did ask about that right to reject, and you talked about when the bids come in, which ones are viable to present to the board, not to just reject,
Yeah,
not to have the final approval for all bids.
correct, but I think in the example we were given, remember there was like, there was a bid, and it was, there was one bid that was like $1,000 more, but the work they were doing was like a lot more, and we were able to make that case for that particular company. We went with a company that cost a little bit more because of the work they do. When I talked about the playground out in Sandown, company we had there, Busby, who does everything for us. They're unbelievable. They did a lot more than we asked. They had to take down a lot more trees. They had to clear a lot more land, and they had a lot of grading and a lot of extra things that they put in, and that's just what they do for us. So I think that was all part of that discussion. But we can certainly go back and look at this again.
Why don't you go take it back? Only my suggestion. Take it back,
with the
model language,
model language.
run it by one more time, make sure, I'm sure Lee can get the model language. Oh, no, now you have it too, Jen. So model language from the New Hampshire School Boards Association.
Yeah, I didn't have access to that, but that was one of the things I had asked for, but I
You
got
got-
that
should-
day. Yeah, I got it that day,
Thank
yeah.
you. Okay, so let's
yeah.
go on, and
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
then we'll adjust our stuff, our motion. So this next one is summer learning.
Summer learning, there's just that last sentence that was removed because it just felt redundant.
Right.
And that it could be addressed through whatever the procedures are. The summer learning policy, it already is encouraging summer learning. So then to be more specific about what that is and what that will look like seemed to lock us in beyond what I felt like we needed to for policy.
And so, to add to that, remember we also talked about allowing the principals some flexibility. If everybody's expected to do summer work, that if they had individual cases or things, that they could work that out at the sites with the families and the teachers that they have. Right? That makes sense?
Well, yeah, because if this policy is gonna be in place for the next 5 years, maybe, that, yes, as we grow and develop, and maybe summer learning might look different.
Okay, on that one then, and then we've got the procedures there, yep.
Yeah, the procedure wasn't,
They just put it in there.
Yeah.
This
they
was just
added- they
recently
just added it.
updated.
Yep.
I noticed.
Okay.
And then my favorite of all, IMG, which is animals in school.
Animals in school. Yeah, this one we, this one we spent a lot of time with. Some of the things that were taken out were just, gosh, all right, let me, principals approving.
Looks good.
Going after owls. Why are you going after owls or Timberlake?
Huh?
Number 2 there. Like an owl would be a special
I think
protected
that
bird
was,
at
I think that
Timberlake.
was in the model language, yeah, I think so. And then the back, we just struck out that very last part that's,
Must approve.
it just didn't make sense the way it was written. No, under number 4 on the back page.
Yep. My favorite line is the teacher will be responsible for the proper control of animals brought into school.
Keep control of those owls.
I did pretty good with those. I had a few turtles that got loose. I didn't control them very well, I'm sorry. They're probably still wandering around the middle school lost in the piping someplace. You never know. Danny,
If my second will agree to remove DJE from my motion.
I agree.
Okay.
okay, so now we've removed that. That'll go back to policy. So can we move along to second read these other policies? Are we okay with that? Got a motion on the floor, everybody's all set, I hear no other comments, I'm gonna call the question then. Kathy, would you read the motion one more time so I know what it is? Everybody hears it?
Mr. Guide, motion to accept the first read policies, BG, BGA, BGB, BGC, IHCA, IMG, seconded by Mr. Boyle.
All right, all in favor? Looks unanimous, thank you very much. Moving on. Mr. Dowd, if you're set. Update, informational, 30 minutes. Whenever you're set.
Thank you. Hot off the presses, I have a draft here on the audit, auditor's report update. Hot off the presses, I have a copy of their latest draft report, which I expect to be finalized and issued tomorrow. There you are.
I'm sorry, so tomorrow, the final?
Lori?
I thought it was supposed to be signed off by 10 o'clock tomorrow, is that what they said?
Here you are.
Thank you.
This is the draft
Yes, I got it.
with the page is numbered. That's good.
Management discussion and analysis is included.
It is not?
It is. Beginning on page 3,
Yep. Yep.
comparative data, you'll note that in addition to the information provided last year, last year's report, including the then current year and the previous year, an additional column, increase or decrease, has been added to the relevant assets, revenues, and expenditures for further analysis, as well as long-term debt. So I expect that generally, unless there are any changes between tonight and tomorrow on final read, this would be very close to approximately what would be issued tomorrow. I hope be issued tomorrow.
So they sent this to today
Correct.
with comments about your, what's it, the MD&A?
MD&A.
MD&A, I'm getting the lingo down here now. Brian would be proud of me, I got the lingo of this stuff. And then, what are we still waiting for? That they're gonna
Well,
send
it has
one?
to be finalized, you know, they have to sign off on it and consider
They
it final.
sign off on it, you sign off
We're
on it.
gonna review on, yep, we'll sign off on it and get that back to their office and
You sign off first, you and the superintendent.
yep.
That's been the process, because I
Correct.
looked at last year's and a few years before. Then you send it back to them, and they do what?
Well, at that point, they would remove the watermarks and unless there are
Move the
any
watermarks and write final?
comments that we have, should we find anything between now and tomorrow, date, and they would apply their signature to the report as well.
This is an awful lot of information, so we'd be kind of looking for kind of consensus on how you'd like to approach this. We're hoping that, okay, this gets signed off here, you heard what he said, goes back, gets signed off, and then we have something that says final. And you really truly believe this is probably the final, as it is, except with a few signatures. There had been some discussion about asking Mr. Campo to come and present. That had been something in the hopper for a while. Is that gonna be necessary? Do you wanna digest this, bring it back? Dan?
So if it's final tomorrow, will it be posted on the SharePoint site?
I could post it tomorrow.
That way,
We're gonna post it tomorrow when it's
that
final.
way we can
on the
all
share-
have the final
Have the
right
benefit.
away. You know,
It'll be what, it's a PDF file. right?
absolutely, whatever it's gonna be, you know, it's just, this is a lot to take in right now.
So you're anticipating it being done and being able to put it on the SharePoint tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't be.
Okay. Brian?
As you just mentioned, I personally think it'd be a great idea if Campo would come down and give us some highlights, walk us, obviously, this is her audit, Jeff, but I think I'd like it personally if Campo and Jeff were sitting side by side and doing some sort of a walkthrough to the board.
So Brian, to be transparent, Brian and I both had opportunities to meet Mr. Campo, to have conversation with him. He probably said, since Brian started the audit, and here we are, he had some conversation, I had some conversations. He may have said the same thing to both Brian and I. We haven't really shared notes on what was said. I don't know if those things that were said out loud are necessarily translated into this. They were I thought some pretty good recommendations. I think Brian heard some things too. So if it's the consensus of the board to invite him, I have no idea if he's available or what it would take to get him to come after you've had a chance to digest this a little bit. Other than looking at the findings, which are the last couple of pages, I bet. That's usually where they are, having looked at a couple of audits in the past. Have a chance to formulate some questions and maybe get some good conversation going, if he's
Are we allowed
willing
to
to
take
do
these?
that, huh?
Are Are we-
Sorry, Brian?
Can we take these home?
Yes. Yes, as far as I know, you can.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, they're marked draft.
They're
No, I
draft,
understand. No, I
as
just
long as you
wa-
say it's
yes.
draft.
That's why I asked if the next one would be posted on the SharePoint, so.
I understand.
So is that our consensus?
Yeah, I think Mike
Yeah,
should
that
come
makes
down
sense.
if he wants to.
Yeah.
I guess we can ask him.
How do you want the invite to go? Want me to call him?
You are the chair.
You giving me permission to call him?
Yeah, I don't think it should come from anybody else.
Yeah.
I can call him. Call his office. Not calling him personally, I'm calling his office and going through the proper protocol and asking him. Brian,
And well, along those conversation, my suggestion is you, when you talk to Mr. Campo, you might want to ask him if how he feels about even addressing from an SAU standpoint. We are the Timberlane School Board versus the SAU School Board, and this report is obviously the Timberlane report.
Right.
So.
I can only talk about
I understand.
Timberlane.
No, you can only talk about Timberlane, but ask him, because to me, if he has any suggestions, we're all ears, because from, I'm sure he himself would have a similar type thing, and, any type of suggestions and improvements, so I'm
Okay.
personally thrilled to see this thing is here, this is great.
Yeah.
Kim, yes.
As you're aware, we had a very lengthy email from Mr. Campo to the board. I think it was sent to the board. I assume as chair that you replied to Mr. Campo on that email?
I did not.
So he has not received a response.
I talked to him on the phone.
I think,
I replied to him.
He did.
Because he copied me too. I
I
replied.
understand that, but I think this was directed to the members of the board, and that the board needs to should have a written response to an email that had, I don't know how many exhibits attached to it, and really pointed out some very concerning issues here. No, it doesn't pertain to this. It pertains to the current fiscal year
But
budget.
his concerns,
Yes.
he was auditing the 16-17 year, correct? So this is the 16-17 audit.
Do you want to?
I
I'm happy
don't.
to continue
don't.
this discussion in public.
No,
Then we need to have a non-public regarding this, because you are correct, but that was not the only thing that was discussed in that email.
maybe that could be when he's here private and we have a private conversation with him.
I'd like him here.
I want him here if we're gonna have, and he has the right to be here, if we're going to question or
I'd like him here.
question him. Right? No? You don't think so, Kim? You disagree?
No, I agree, but I think that the board should have a discussion before he comes to this board to see how we want to approach. He will be here representing his firm. I think that the board should come to some consensus before we have a discussion with him.
Then we're not, but I don't want to, I believe we
We have
came
not-
very close last time, and I want to be careful that we don't professionally, that we don't hurt his feelings professionally. That's not what we're trying to do here,
The-
correct?
I understand, but this board has not had a discussion on this email, and I feel it warrants a discussion of the board without Mr. Campo here, before he gets here. I know how I feel about what I'm reading here.
Okay,
I have no idea how the other members of the board feel. So we're gonna have 9 people that have not come to some consensus about this and have Mr. Campo in it. It doesn't, I just
I'd
don't.
really like the board to have a chance to look at this, digest this. They want to go back and look at that email again. There are dates that changed on that. They did. It was a little bit fluid. There was a little bit of slip and slide to get it all to fit together. But he had said May 18th, and it's here tonight. So we're a day ahead, as far as I'm concerned, and now it's just a few little sign-offs. And we should be, as he said, I'm gonna say, he said May 18th, he'll have it ready. It's done for May 18th. So, I don't think we want to discuss that email anymore but that's my opinion. Jen?
I think there's a lot of information here
Yeah.
in between that email and what was sent and what I did have a chance to look at from what was sent before having this in hand. How much time do you think we would spend with him, and would it be best to have a separate meeting for that so that we can not have it? I don't want to feel like I'm rushing him, but I also know that we have a lot of other things on upcoming agendas, so
Okay,
I'm just
so
wondering how the
are
board
we-
would feel about having a special
What do
meeting
we think
just
about
for
a
that.
separate meeting, if in fact he's available? Yes, no, let's see what he says.
I guess talk to him first and then maybe ask Mrs. Belcher if she can pull the board on his available dates and then
Yep.
we go from there.
Well, especially if
can-
he's not
With you.
available for a
Dates-
Thursday, maybe
yeah,
he's
dates
available
and
for a
our dates,
Tuesday.
yeah.
I'm with you.
Brian?
I think it might make sense to acknowledge the receipt of his letter, just say, but we as a board would like to discuss with you in detail, you know, versus trying to go back and forth on, there was an awful lot of stuff there, and a lot of the stuff was exhibits. So I think it might make sense just, again, to acknowledge the receipt of his letter, and just say, okay, we as a board are now formally requesting you to come in and, you know, substantiate your concerns, statements, whatever, and as we as a board would like to get a better feel for understanding what's going on. Great, we have a product right now, this is good, and my conversations, he had some thoughts that obviously we're not gonna talk about on the air, I'm sure probably someone's with you. But I do think it's healthy conversation to have with the board. And obviously with Jeff, he is our key guy, he is our business administrator, so I want, that's how I think it should go down.
Yep. Kim?
I'm in full agreement with that. My concern is that some of what is mentioned falls outside the purview of this board and into the purview of the SAU board. And if we don't have the SAU board here, we may not be able to discuss freely what needs to be discussed.
Just take one step at a time.
Yeah, I want to talk to him about Timberlane stuff right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can you draft some kind of letter
I'm gonna,
acknowledging receipt of his, and steal his language from the first paragraph, whatever, and just acknowledge his receipt, and yours can be one or two
sentence.
paragraphs versus you won't need the exhibits.
let me work on that.
Sure. Sounds good to me.
Okay, so study away.
Yeah.
There you go. Good reading.
Now,
I'm moving on to the budget update. So switching to budget stuff. We've got our chart here again, Mr. Dowd. What's happening?
It's very consistent. I did hear and understand, I believe an email went out from Ms. Farah on the 162-262 on regular education. That should be removed. And, you know, and from my list here of the district requirements, you know, I'm still working with the superintendent to look at what the needs are for the district, where staffing will end up, where it will land, and be able to propose where, if you were to make budget adjustments, where those would be in one action, so that we'll have a clean, working budget, if you will.
Kim?
so you're saying that that delta is now wiped down to zero? It's not a negative 162?
No, you had said that it was in that neighborhood, that you felt that the district requirements should not be, that those should be, district requirements should be lower by over 100,000, if I'm not mistaken. For regular education.
Right, I didn't bring that email with me, but I
Yeah, that's
I
the
can
one you
recalculate.
sent. I forwarded on.
But I guess I don't, so why is that number still a negative 162? I guess I'm trying to understand whether you're in agreement with that or not in agreement with that.
I'm
'cause
acknowledging it,
it's-
yeah, I'm acknowledging it, and we continue to.
Acknowledging it, and we're gonna keep adjusting this chart.
We haven't adjusted the chart to reflect that.
Right, well, we're looking at it, the regular education is one of our bigger lines right now, and That's where we estimate that figure to be, and until we arrive at a more comfortable figure, for where that's going to be, the 162 is there,
But you're still working on it.
still working on it, yeah.
Brian?
Obviously, we have 5 line items on this 8.5 by 11 here. So I assume you and the superintendent are working on an overall budget that addresses the 71.8.
Addresses the what?
The 71.8.
Correct.
The overall budget.
Yeah.
And then we'll just you leave the $500,000 in capital, and then the rest you move around, because obviously you're our updated thing on retirements here, with luncheon coming up here, so hiring process, what does that go like right up through September? So, how would you,
Well,
as you guys are working this thing out, that's what I'm trying to get a flavor of.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, no, you're, hopefully a bulk of it will be done before July 1. There are some hiring that takes place in July and August. And I know I talked about that, people leave for different reasons. A husband or a wife gets a job somewhere else or that sort of thing. But I think right now, and Dr. Farrad asked this question the last time, right now, in terms of trying to get the administrative organization kind of in place, I hope by the next meeting that I may have something for you to take a look at, which I'm trying to find some money there, right? So I think it's in the $500,000 range in terms of, and that's not including benefits, that's just in salaries. And I think that to Jeff's point, to Attorney Dowd's point, excuse me, there's going to be a lot of movement to fit all the pieces together, like the staffing, the administrative, the reductions, who retired, what positions were critical that you needed to replace, what are some of the sacrifices that we ended up making, and how do we make that 71.8 work? If you ask me the question, do I think it's going to work? I do believe it's going to work.
I'm sure of that.
Yeah. No, and I actually, and I've had, a lot of the administrators, I've met with them privately about some different responsibilities, and I talked to a few of you privately about it, and people are ready to take on different challenges. So there's no new positions being added. There's some, it may sound a little different because they're doing different work, but there's no new positions, no administrative positions. There's less administrative positions. It's just what we're asking people to do. All right, so as we shift that around, and that will create potentially some openings, because there's been some retirements. There's some people that won't be accepting contracts moving into next year. So they don't necessarily resign, they don't have a contract for next year, right? So we didn't offer them, we would have offered them a contract, but they might have signed a contract somewhere else. So that's still all, I use the term, the dust is still settling. People, you might have gotten an offer, you may not have accepted it. You may have chose to stay, or you may choose to leave. And so I'm hoping by the next meeting I'll have something for you. And what I'm trying to do is have 2 charts, what this year looked like organizationally, and what I think next year will look like. I'm pretty excited about the lineup. I'm pretty excited. I think we're going to be in good shape. What it's starting to look like, a month ago, it would have looked completely different than it looks now. I would have been doing it 2 or 3 times. And I know it sounds easy for me to say, but it's the truth, because I've had some surprises, and then I've been pleasantly surprised by perhaps some people that have chosen to stay. So, we have some really talented young people, and they're versatile, and we can move them around a little bit and meet all the needs of the district. And that should free up some more money as we start to think about what's the sweet. You told me get the number of reduced positions to 15. That's the goal. How do we get there with the 71.8? I think we all agree. We know some money has to move around on this sheet here, right? I mean, and we've had a couple surprises in the last week, in terms of move-ins. So.
Well, I was just trying to address that.
Yeah, do you think that
To where that goes.
that would be something tentatively then that we could have on the next agenda? I'm gonna call it a staffing report, and that would help out.
Yeah, part of it, here's my struggle, part of it could be, part of it's public, but some of it would have to be non-public, because we'd be talking about
Can't talk
specific
about a
people.
position
And I'd be making a case as to why this person will be really good, this person will be really good here. And the rationale behind moving around and what that organizational structure would look like, I think gets into some personnel in a way that would not be, I don't think it would be appropriate to be discussing that publicly. Until you've decided and endorsed And
This is the time of the year where the educators move.
Yeah.
That's why they had a certain date, April 15th date, then they have, they're at the dates most people have to work with.
Yeah,
Accepting positions at new schools and.
yeah, most places, you may have a collective bargaining agreement where you have to issue contracts by a certain date after they're approved. You have the April 15th, so every district's just a little bit different, but you're right, this is the time. Most people, the bulk are assigned somewhere else by July 1, the bulk. But there are a lot of unique, and then it's superintendent to superintendent. Like, for instance, if we had somebody who signed a contract here, and then someone left somewhere else and they wanted to offer a position to somebody here, this is a courtesy call. They'll call them, can you get so-and-so released from their contract so that we can hire them? We've been bringing those to the board and asking you to release them in the case that they've already signed a contract. That's what we've been typically been doing, instead of, and every time we say, hey, congratulations, good luck. As long as they're not leaving at the last minute and leaving us without a critical person, then sometimes we have to work out a deal. So the short answer to your question is yes, bulk of that takes place in the next month or so.
Kim?
I'm pretty sure I heard at the last meeting that there was not going to be a reorganization, but that's not what I'm hearing now.
No. What I said is if there were changes, I'd bring them to you.
Okay.
That was my
fine.
exact words, because you asked, is there going to be a reorganization? So
So there clearly must be, because I see 2 positions advertised right now that I can't find on the current organizational chart.
but those are positions, it's just a different name for a different position. It's a position that's on the chart, it's just a different name. The responsibilities, if you start looking at them, so it's not a new position. It's not a new position. It's a position that currently exists. I'm arranging, like I told you before, I'm trying to get, I'm meeting with individuals, I'm looking, what are your career aspirations, what are the district needs? I'm trying to match those things up. I'm looking at what are the needs of the district. I'm trying to make sure those job descriptions meet our needs. If we're going to do it with less people, some of the job descriptions have to change a little bit. And sometimes the title may be different, but it's the same type of position. It's a curriculum position, or it's assistant principal's an assistant principal. A principal's a principal, but some of those other positions are very specific about what they do.
I know, but I don't see these 2 positions anywhere that I can ascertain where they are in the chart with the name that they're either being advertised for or the name that I might guess right now that they have.
I could show you, and you go, oh, you would say to me that makes sense.
Without specifying it now.
Well, what is the current position that you're saying is, you're advertising for an elementary school curriculum coordinator. Where is that position right now in the org chart? Under a different name, that's all.
Just give me
And
one
where's the
second.
high school
Give me
curriculum?
1 second. I would believe, and Christie's, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I don't want to get this wrong, because there's a little bit of, there's some movement. You're asking about the elementary curriculum
Coordinator.
literacy coordinator? Literacy coordinator.
I think the position is just elementary curriculum coordinator that's advertised for.
But it's currently the literacy coordinator.
Currently
So that
literacy.
the literacy coordinator is not going to be the elementary curriculum coordinator. So that's the same position.
Same position, different responsibility, well, similar.
Adding.
Similar responsibility, adding to that. They're not just coordinating literacy, now they're doing much more than that.
And the high school curriculum coordinator is currently called,
Currently called a middle school curriculum coordinator.
so we won't have a middle school
Look at
curriculum
that
coordinator, we're
document.
just going to have a high school
It's the same
curriculum
one, it's
coordinator?
on-
He's 6 to 12. We're getting into the
6.
details now.
Well, that's
No, I know you're asking the
high school
question.
Careful.
curriculum coordinator.
Yeah, so it's
That would have made sense. Okay,
title changes.
okay. And then one
Other
other
question?
budget note here.
Yes, budget, back to the budget.
Food service, you're showing a difference of 150,000 to the
Where, what
negative.
page are you on, kiddo?
I'm on the single page that we
Oh,
have
that's still
right
on the
here.
front page, yep, okay.
The actual for 2016-17 was 1.348 million. The voted budget is 1.275. That's a difference of 73,000, not 150,000.
I'm sorry, Kim, what number is food service?
There are no numbers on
She's saying
here.
that the 16-17 was
1.348 million.
one through, that's by your calculation, or
It's not by my calculation. It's
so,
what the
yes.
district reported.
the district reported 1.348 for 16-17.
Right,
We voted for 18-19, 1.275.
right. That difference is 73,000. The district requirements the enrollment has stayed level to flat, so I'm a little, not sure where that 1.425 million came from.
Did we sign a contract in between 2 years ago and right now? The food service?
It's not so much the contract, I'm not sure the contract itself is more or less. Our revenue has been a little bit better than anticipated, which I'm very pleased about. And when you look at what the potential exposure is, I really need to budget for what's reasonable. And when I look at it, I say I'm not even sure that 1.4 would be reasonable. So make it a little higher than that, just to make sure we're covered with what would be reasonable.
So what are you projecting this year? We've got, roughly 4 weeks left in the school year.
Hmm?
So what's your projection for this year, for this actual?
As we get closer, I would anticipate a little higher than we were last year. So we're about 15,000 better through April. So
you're looking at,
Are you looking at 1.4 and up,
well,
17, 18?
yeah, there could be another spike. It's.
I mean, isn't it pretty safe to say that all those numbers will change? District requirements, one way or another?
well,
get this?
I suppose if we're gonna say that, then there would be no point really even looking at this if everything is gonna change.
No, but
So, yes, they do change to a certain extent, but this budget, which is the voted budget, I'm getting, this underfunding, this budget was what, within $100,000 of BudCom's proposed budget.
No, but we
So-
don't have the BudCom's proposed budget, we got this budget.
well, you know what lines.
1.2 is what's in there.
You know what line scares me the most? It's the second line, because I know that number's not big enough.
Anymore.
I
I'm,
know that for sure.
I know, and I can see what it looks like on the,
That number scares me. The other ones, I think, well, we have to make it work. We have to make 71.8 work somehow, some way. We gotta move some money around. So if we're short in food service, we have to make it up somewhere, right? I mean, I don't have
well,
a choice.
again, that's an offset by revenue.
Offset by.
I know, but we still have to raise it.
Still have to appropriate it.
Yeah, we had this discussion last.
Yeah, I know.
It's a circular discussion.
Well,
Anything else about this budget update? He's included, looks like, all kinds of Timberlane revenue, some expenditures.
Can I just ask this question? There's a little note here on revenue. It says reclass, and it looks like 3 million got moved into a different line.
yes, yeah.
What, why is that?
When we received adequacy aid we typically have recognized that information coming in from the state on the remittance. And the remittance that they sent to us had changed what was received. So we booked it and said, well, if it should be in the equitable education line, we'll move it there. But and I have, say what you want about the state, the one thing that they're good at is doing the same thing, right, over and over and over and over, right? So the remittance should say the same thing, probably since the beginning of time, since the beginning of their computer system, and it was changed. And it threw all of us, it threw me for a loop. I just said, this matches another line that we have. Is this something that they intentionally want us to report out on differently? Well, we'll put it there, and if it turns out that it's different, we'll move it. I don't really recall any other instance. Now, it may be vague. It may be, the remittance advice might be vague. It might be nebulous, but it's never been inconsistent from payment to payment. And so we reclassed it according to what we would reclass it with what they had sent. And no, it was equitable aid. It should be equitable aid and treated and reported to the state in that way. Occasionally, I'll hear from the state and they'll say, oh, can you report this way, or this particular program should be reported that way. So it gave me enough cause to pause and say, hey, are we going to be reporting this the right way? I don't know why the remittance advice changed. You write it down. It's the first time that I've seen anything different from the state, and it took me a little bit of a surprise. So, but it should be, it's equitable aid. That's, we're reclassed up. But I wanted to make a note, 'cause it's a debit and a credit line. What would normally be a credit.
Right, I see it changed from one to the other.
Yeah.
Yes, Brian?
Am I not reading this right here, Jeff? Where is the expense side of the food service?
That's not reported on this report. This reports out on the general fund.
Okay.
When we budget everything and capture it, and that's why you see the, everything being captured in the 5,000 lines that are captured in other funds. That's how we report to the state, but we report on that in the fund itself.
Are there any other expenditures that are not on here besides food service?
Oh, our grants, federal projects, performing arts reports as a 500 fund. You'll see those in the annual
I guess
report.
I'm trying to lead you into your next agenda item.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, actually, because.
Are we moving into that next agenda
Just
item?
asking that question.
Yeah,
I'm happy to, but let's move into the next agenda item, which
They're
is.
kind of related.
Yeah, that's why I put them all
They're very
together.
So,
End of year projections, are you anywhere ready to give us any of that?
I am working on some things which have come up this week, which lead me to be uncomfortable with any firm projection number. I do believe that we're going to be under $1 million, probably more in the neighborhood of about 700 to 800,000. One of the questions that you had asked at Budget Committee, and I think it's a fair thing, right? Where do you think we'll be for capital at the end of the year? Where's that looking like? Where does it look like that's going to be? That I do have. Looking at where we are right now and what we have slated, and I'll direct your attention down into those 5,000 lines and just up a little bit into the 4,600. If you see on the 4,600 line, which is on the page 8 of your report, you'll see a balance in that account of 128,000, and of which I think that's one of our bigger variables. We do tend to have some spend just naturally cyclically occurring every year as spring moves into summer and we begin our summer projects. However, of that 128,000, I would estimate that about 65,000 would be for the Pollard boiler project. So when we look at all of the figures and all of the factors that we have out there, looking at all of the equipment lines that we have and all the capital lines that we have, my estimate would be that we would be within about 100,000 on capital, and we do have some funds which will remain in that 4,600 account, 60,000, 65,000. But if that's helpful for project planning or anything like that, I'll put it out there. I definitely did not think that we had a discussion about the capital reserve, right, on the ballot for 250,000. We weren't going to have.
We're not going to have 250,000 to put in there.
We weren't going to have 250,000 to put in there, so I'm glad the voters voted for it, but it.
Have you encumbered all your salaries? When I see encumbrances,
Encumbered or?
have you encumbered? Like, obviously you've.
Yeah.
So the salaries are encumbered, but what's not encumbered are those costs that are going to be associated with retirements, which is one of those factors that I mentioned. We're still getting those together in those final numbers, and as we get closer to the end of the year, where those are going to be, and so those are not encumbered.
Would those be in the order of 100,000, 500,000?
Be 500,000.
Okay, because I'm just, again,
So you haven't encumbered that yet? You haven't?
No.
Because you haven't got that all solid yet.
Correct. Yep.
all right, because can I just take a look here? Because, again, I look back at prior years, and now it's changed dramatically since the end of March. I'm not really sure why, but 2017, our year-to-date was 50.2. Now it's 51.4. Encumbrances were 12.3 last year and 12.4 this year. Our percent remaining year-to-year, last year was 11.33%. This year it's 11.44%. So we're very close to our percent remaining. Of course, now the budget jumped 1.2 million from last year to this year. So we're looking, at least from what I can see, other than the retirements, we're kind of on the same spend track here and encumbrances. Would you disagree with that?
Well, and let me just take a look at the encumbrances. The encumbrances are not 100% accurate as a reflection of what the spend is going to be. And you, Brian, you and I were talking about this. I went over and kind of showed you, particularly in our group insurance lines and in the 2,900 category. Our payroll system just doesn't properly reflect what those encumbrances are, and there is some exposure there. And by way of example, if I don't, and I should have, 'cause I know you like to look at the previous year. So let's take a look at the previous year, just in that line alone. And see where we're at. So I'm showing encumbrances in that 2,900 category. I believe it's the encumbrances of 1.3 million. We're at 1 million this year. You know, that's off 30%, you know, the same date, same time. It just is not, it's not a complete and accurate reflection of what those encumbrances are.
Jeff, are you, for encumbrances, are the post-employment benefits, are they showing up as encumbered?
No.
There you go. That is it.
They're
That's a
not
lot
showing.
more this year than there has been in previous years.
Oh, well, and a lot more, I think, in terms of dollars, yeah.
Yeah, it's the
In terms of-
dollar money, it's the dollar amount.
the number of retirements
not
as much as the dollar
number of
amount.
retirements, right, it's the dollar.
How do you come up with post-employment benefits? What is in that number, post-employment benefits?
Well, some of it's vacation time buyout, there could be comp time, there could be, there's a retirement incentive, it's years of service is 1.25% times your years of service off your salary.
Sick time buyout.
Sick time buyout, there's a lot of those, it's all contractual, and it's different for, some contracts are different than others. But that's why I was asking, because I know that number is another number that, I've been looking at very closely as, in terms of.
Well done, you hit it a lot quicker than I probably could have, so well done. And you obviously haven't been paying attention. We do have one other that's not captured, and it's almost a non-cash, non-immediate cash, but it is out there. And there are a number of buckets for those post-employment, I would say post-employment, but the retirement, and if you want to call them post-employment benefits.
But we know the people that are retiring and the people that are leaving.
Almost all of them.
Almost all, we have, here's the thing, so there's two things, so sometimes the retirees, but most of them have declared. But some people may leave, whether it's their choice or another reason, and they be entitled to some post-employment benefits. And so, not to an exact dollar amount, and everybody was like, well, how much? And well, it depends how many vacation days they may or may not use between now and June 30th. Each day, and you're talking about a few people. You're not talking about one or two people. You're talking about quite a few people. So, I have an idea, ballpark, where I think that is, because I'm looking at it from different lines. So I'm looking at it administratively. Okay, what's the breakage? Like, what are potential savings? What are breakage in terms of salary and positions, and trying to save some money? And then obviously there's some that's contractual through a collective bargaining agreement with the TTA or the TSSU, which is different, a little different.
The reason I'm asking, I mentioned this, I think, maybe at a board meeting or budget committee, is obviously you now have less than 6 weeks left in the year. So if this board is going to do something to try to, if there's monies in this budget to try to do something for the summer,
I expect
to help yourself for next year, we have to do that sooner than later.
I expect to have a conservative number for you, meaning you can take that number to the bank in terms of, and I know he didn't have one, I was asking all day, right? So give him don't tell him it's more than it is or less than, give him a conservative number, one that you can count on. But here's the worst, here's the challenge here. We don't budget necessarily for post-employment benefits.
Okay?
Well, now.
So every year, it's always come out of what you potentially could have had left, because it was never really it wasn't that big of a hit where you had to say, and you're guessing kind of to some degree. I mean, some people will tell you early on they're going to retire a year from now. Sometimes it's surprises, and sometimes people leave for different reasons. So it's a bigger number than we've been accustomed to, I guess, is in a year that's not a great year for it to be a bigger number than we're accustomed to.
What is that number, though?
I think it's, well, I'd say just from the administrative standpoint, it's in the $300,000 to $400,000 range anyway, maybe more than that.
So,
Typically, what has it been prior years, I'm sorry?
take a look.
What has it been prior years?
It would really vary depending if a senior person left and it's an SAU employee, it's different because that comes out of an SAU budget as opposed to a Timberlane person or obviously a Hempstead person. But, yeah, this has been a unique year for some of our veterans have decided to retire or move on for different reasons, so.
You can take a look right in the report.
I don't know the exact, Jeff can tell you the exact numbers.
Page 32, for example, what it was last year.
What was it?
Well, you'll see that there, under long-term liabilities, they've captured compensated absences. This isn't the comprehensive number. Correct,
in the
yeah.
audit.
Dep reports.
Yeah, right in front of you, fresh off the presses. So you'll see that 3,167,000 is recognized. And then if you look at the balance, 3,065, but you'll see that due within 1 year, 509,741. So that was the amount that was due after 6/31, which would have been tied to those retirements. So it's a healthy number.
So let's go back to projected end of year. I think you'd be closer to a number by next, should I leave it on the agenda for next
Please,
time?
yeah, please do. Please do.
Are we fine about it being on the budget, on the agenda for next time, along with our other?
Okay.
And don't we usually have some list of potential projects that we might do at that time of the year, based on what we're seeing we may have left, especially in capital?
I think what's typically happened, yes and no. I mean, there's board projects that board members would bring to us, or you would ask us to bring them to you.
Oh,
Meaning-
I only have 1 year of experience. Last year, a list was
I'll
brought
ask
to us.
about that list though, Kim.
Okay,
I hear what you're saying, the list of projects, if there's something that, Yep.
So that it
And
can be
I would
encumbered.
imagine that we have, the facilities chairman is here, and we were at the facilities meeting, so there may be some things we can talk about. So I'll make sure that's on next week's,
And-
2 weeks.
I'm sure
forward.
we have been looking and trying to price out and see what might be good to fit on that list based on the needs that we have.
Right.
Some, we've been surprised, and probably not in a good way, on some of them that we just don't have, we don't have the room
Right, not
for
gonna have the
to even
money.
consider this year as an encumbrance, so.
Yeah, I didn't want you to draw an inference that I didn't think, they were worthy projects. There's just so many of them that
Oh, yeah, no, that
board
wasn't.
said, like, this, we really want the tiles replaced in the middle school ceilings, and we're like,
No, I
okay.
didn't,
Oh,
I
okay.
was just speaking to my
Yep, we'll see if we
only.
can get the list of potential things or possible things. Yes, Kim?
Can I go back to the post-retirement benefits? How many sick days can people accrue and how many vacation days? Because I know where I work, once you leave, you lose it. So what's the total number here?
It varies.
It does.
It varies, well, can you
Depends
give
on
me
the depends on the contract.
is it,
I know
can you give me a
mine.
high number and a low number? Like, can somebody accrue, I don't know, you've been here 20 years, I haven't used a sick day, I've got 200 days of sick days?
I think I use 120 of them.
120?
120 is
It's
the
like,
max?
yeah,
Thank you.
120%,
By our teacher's
90%.
contract, I can only speak to the teacher's contract, and the president can correct me if I'm wrong. You can, and I know he will. You can get a benefit of 120 days maximum
That's a,
of what you've got. So if I had 450 days after being here for 43 years, I was given money for 120 days based on a rate.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know that rate off the
Just-
top of my
just
head
curious.
anymore, and I've been retired for a few years, so I'm
So
not
I
sure what
just
the rate
wanted
is.
to know the number.
Yeah, so you can,
Yeah.
but that isn't, everybody's contract isn't
no,
like
that's
that.
collectively bargained. I can tell you that there are many administrators that lose their vacation days each year because they get the cap, they can't carry over.
Teachers don't have any
And
vacation days.
administrators have that same 120?
No, I think it's,
Oh, no,
is it 120? Okay. I know the SAU ones are different, they're less.
And that's part of a collective bargaining agreement?
Not
Part
the,
of
not the
It's
administration,
benefits,
is it?
it's part of their contracts, it's a benefit sheet that goes with their contracts.
So see, I like the reaction though, so they all know that, see that? So when you see I'm talking about that, you getting that quick audience participation. They know that one very well.
Yeah, I don't want to speak
Wouldn't
to
you?
administration.
Of course I would.
That's not my
Of course I would.
expertise.
I'd know that.
Speak to the teachers, because I'm an expert, so.
I will say we haven't done, I don't think, a great job in the past budgeting, and we have two issues: recognizing liability, long-term, and recognizing the likely cash obligation. And that likely cash obligation would need to be included in the budget. Previous years, it really hadn't been to the same degree. This year, we're obviously working on having our budget a little closer to fine, and that will have to be something we'll have to consider, including, because we aren't, we're budgeting a lot closer to the actual time that we're gonna be utilizing the funding as opposed to budgeting in the fall. So this was something
Right,
that
so-
I had looked at and brought even to the auditor's attention, and that's why you'll see that there's an adjustment in a prior year adjustment in a restatement in the financials reflecting that. As I said, I wanna make sure that we're capturing every bucket, every area, either as a long-term liability which we don't have to worry about from a cash perspective right now, but also in order to be able to budget that as a line item.
I understand that, and so
Yeah.
for the audience, do not infer anything by my question. It was just a question because it's something that we need to consider, that it doesn't appear that we've been considering.
Yeah, no, not well.
And it can be a significant amount.
Yeah, we've typically been able to manage. It just,
I know,
but the
but-
SAU, when it was standalone, it's much smaller. That's why the auditors picked up on it and said, you need to budget for some of these
The auditors didn't pick up on it.
these things. Oh,
I had the discussion with them, and it was almost a $2 million adjustment. They did pick up on it after we had the discussion. I said, I want to make sure everything is here. And it's a $2 million restatement.
yeah, I had that discussion with them before you were hired.
Oh, you did?
So, yeah.
They still didn't
We were having that discussion for several years.
Okay,
recognize
all
it?
right. We're not gonna
Just
talk
telling
about the auditing firm. All right, hearing no other thing, then we're gonna put financials back on, the end-of-year financials back on the budget for next time, maybe have a list of projects. Moving on to school, yes,
Sorry,
Kim?
one thing, it relates to budget. I know we talked about we have a new treasurer and perhaps getting some update or feedback on the treasurer.
Has she started?
I believe she has. I haven't spoken to her personally.
Gosh, she's wonderful. They both are.
Gosh,
Wonderful.
they're wonderful. Let's put that in the
There's your
minutes.
feedback.
There we
Yes.
go, awesome.
Would it make sense to have them here when Mike's here? Campo?
I would
You want to
think so.
invite the treasurers?
That's a,
It's it's the team, right? I mean,
Okay, great.
I think it's,
I would, based on where our treasurers are compensated at present, although maybe it could coincide with signing checks or whatnot, but just be,
We'll see what their availability is. I
Yeah.
don't want to put them on the
well,
spot.
I think it's good to
They're
just
like good
invite them.
umpires. Come in, do your job, go home.
yeah.
They just may
Not-
want to hear it.
Make or break the meeting over the treasurer.
Yeah,
Let's put it
yeah.
that way. I mean,
Right, okay, I got you.
yeah.
They can't, yeah, gotcha. All right. So, gosh, they're wonderful, is the phrase.
Agree.
School board training options then, we're down to, I had Kathy put a chart in, thank you, Mrs. Belcher. Here's who voted. And it appears that, let's see, 1 was the priority, so it's the lowest number, right,
Correct.
Kathy?
Correct.
Roles and responsibility got the highest, or the lowest score.
Can we have them here on 3 topics? 'Cause we'll just hit the top 3.
Can we, yeah, that's,
I think depending on what the topics are, they can do like 4 to 5, depending on how in-depth you want to go.
could you come into one, and then if you don't want that one, come to the ones you want?
Well, we have 3 5s, so that might be a problem. We could do the top 4.
3 fives, we need 3 fives.
27's on there 3 times, and that's number 5. In the ranking, if you rank
right.
them.
Oh,
No, no, no,
okay,
no,
that's
no,
what I
Next
not,
meant.
one.
not that. If you rank them,
there's
you have
22,
3 that are ranked 5, so.
18 comes next, right?
Yeah,
Then the 22,
yeah.
so
Yep.
that's 3 right there. Yeah,
25 is collective bargaining, sorry.
I added this non-public meetings and minutes to the list because I think it's important, given some of our conversations.
where would,
I don't know where it would fall under. I'm
we could
just
ask
saying.
to say, could we have some info on non-public?
You could add that as your number 5 instead of,
Right,
If it can be,
maybe it's part of something else they would
Exactly.
present, that's what I was
Yes.
thinking. I don't think it's a whole evening on non-public.
no, but just,
So you have roles of responsibility, budgeting, goal setting, strategic plan, and what is your 4th one?
4th is collective bargaining.
And then your 5th is the info on non-public.
Non-public
and-
meetings and minutes.
Right, non-public and minutes, yes. Okay,
Okay.
so now we need to see what they can do for us.
Yep.
And get some dates. Moving on, okay?
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda then is the goals. So I hoped you had a chance to look that over. You can see what we did last year. I think we need to have a discussion and/or I'm suggesting we have a workshop, right, like we did last year, about goals.
Over the summer.
We
at some
did it,
point.
It was hot, I remember that. We were in the high school library, if you recall. Do you want me to set up a workshop?
That makes
Set up a
sense.
workshop.
Yeah.
You need to do your homework, though, and be ready to participate in the board goals process. Yes. There may be some you would say, well, that was a good one. We should always have an academic goal. Of course we should. You may want to rephrase it. We may want to use the same language. So I'll set up a workshop then.
And then, so the workshop would be to like formulate this, and then it would come to a school board meeting where we would go over them all and then.
That's what we did last year, I believe.
Makes sense.
Yeah, Kim.
So, one of the things that I just realized was that the superintendent's bonus is tied directly to the superintendent's goals, and that the superintendent's goals are based off the school board's goals.
Correct.
So, clearly, we achieved all these goals last year. Because the superintendent did get a max bonus, which meant his goals were completely met. So, that's my inference here. So, I think that if that is the case, that we need to develop SMART goals here that are measurable so that when the superintendent takes these, they can be placed into his goals so that they're very quantifiable so that we can look at that when we're doing the evaluation.
And I remember discussing that last summer at the workshop, that they should be SMART goals. They should be achievable, they should be simple, they should be timely, not these like, it'll just happen kinds of things. So I'm into that. So we would take that into consideration when we write our new goals, that they be using that format. And I believe Lee, I know Kim is, I have, I know Sarah has written, and I'm sure the rest of us can say that too. We've participated, that's how teachers write their goals, their SMART goals. So we'd be happy to write it that way, you think? Write them in that formatting?
If I could, since you're talking about my goals.
Well, I wasn't talking about your goals, so
Yeah,
no,
because
we're not talking
these are your
about
goals. This is what you do, not what I do.
I do realize.
Very different. I take your goals and I develop my goals, but this is what you do, not what I do. Just be clear on that.
Correct, but our goals inform your goals.
I use your goals to develop my goals.
That's, she did.
Inform, develop.
You don't write my goals. I
inform,
write my
develop.
goals.
I
No,
didn't
she
say
didn't
we
say
write
she
your
wrote your
goals.
goals.
I said these goals inform your goals or help you develop your goals. So it's,
I've chosen to do it that way. That's correct. Yep.
so. All right.
We're gonna
so-
write SMART goals,
Or attempt to.
we're gonna write SMART.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, we'll set that up, see what we've got.
And so we're really gonna have to start from scratch, because as
I
far as I'm
think,
concerned,
I'm
these are
not
all
sure it
met.
has to be from scratch, but I think that there are some things on here that are worth continuing. No, just say, we're dumping all that.
I'm not saying we're dumping them, but
We can rewrite. Rewrite?
I
I'm
think
gonna
these
end this
goals were
discussion and
met.
move on, if we can, to the administrator's report.
Very good. I have one donation that I've accepted, and I wanted to inform you, Liz Costa, as many of you know, on behalf of her daycare, I believe, made a $500 donation to the Into the Woods production.
Excellent,
So I wanted to inform you, let you know that I've accepted it on your behalf because it's $500.
thank you.
So thank you, Liz,
Mrs.
for your
Costa.
generous donation.
Personnel?
Personnel report. We have a professional resignation. Kristen Walker, a special education teacher at Pollard, only been with us for 1 year. I'd ask for a motion to accept that resignation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dan and second by Sean to accept the resignation of Kristen Walker. All in favor? Looks like that's unanimous.
Thank you. And I
Good
have,
luck in her master's degree. Going for that.
I have 3 nominations. We have a Kim Bushwald, did I pronounce that correctly?
I don't know, I saw that.
That's the Sandown North FLES teacher. Michael Castano, an English teacher, and Ann Epperson, that's an English teacher. at the high school. These are 3 of the jobs that we needed to post primarily because of the collective bargaining agreement. These are people that we're familiar with, that we'd like to bring back as part of bringing people back into positions. These aren't the positions they were in the previous year.
Motion to accept all 3?
Second?
Motion to accept all 3 into these positions?
So they're going back into the same position they were?
It's not the same position they were at in the previous year, but these were positions that were they were in a different position that was a 1-year contracted position, so I needed to post them because of the collective bargaining agreement. These are people that worked for us last year that were non-renewed because their position had expired or a person had come back. Like, say, for instance, one of these people were in for a maternity leave.
Okay. Well,
That makes
it's-
sense? Okay.
Well, the question is, I'm looking at the certifications, and I'm looking at the positions, and there's one that doesn't match up.
Okay, don't be careful here,
That's all
so,
I'm saying.
I know. See it. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of these 3 positions? 6, opposed, 1, abstaining, 0, so,
And I can talk to you
6.
privately about that if you want, if it's what,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, just to clarify
Yeah.
for you,
Oh,
as to
well,
why I
it's-
nominate that.
yep, yep.
I understand it. It's just disappointing that others voted
Committee-
without having that clarification.
Committee reports. Any committee reports? Dan?
I actually have one that we're going to need to vote on. So Paula needs a new boiler. We're not doing the wall systems or the window wall systems in the courtyard for the high school. They estimate the whole job to be $65,000. The window wall systems were $134,000.
Well, that's what the CIP had budgeted.
Right, but that's-
That's not what the actual cost.
No, it wasn't the actual cost was over
200
200, right? I think, Brian, was it over 200? So anyways, the board made a motion,
The
voted.
Facilities Committee.
The facilities committee made a motion, voted unanimously to send this to the board to have us vote on it to go forward with this. We need this to be able to put the boiler out to bid, so we can get prices on that and get moving on it, so.
So they recommended,
Can
they
you just-
recommended to our board
Right.
that, looking at the facilities budget and the projects,
Yeah.
that this project was something we could do because we weren't going to be able to do it.
Because we weren't gonna be able to
And we
do it.
had the money.
That's right.
Okay.
We have the money.
We have the money, it's no.
Already.
Because the other project is not
Is
happening.
It's
just
not
not gonna
happening
happen.
because it's actually gonna
The
cost
bid is
more to
way
do
higher.
that than what we thought.
I'd rather wait, because when you had that meeting, apparently, from what the conversation was here, you didn't know exactly how much was left in the capital. By the next, we will know exactly what's left, and we maybe want to do more than one boiler, because it might save us a substantial amount of money.
We don't,
We're not, Madam
ahead,
Chair,
go
if you
ahead.
want, you can ask Mr. Gary, I don't think we have any plans to do another boiler.
Oh, well,
we don't, but it's the need.
It's the one that's broken,
It's broken.
or whatever it is.
I know, but
Yeah.
I understand that, but we did have a whole list of boilers. I'm just saying, I don't know why I think it would be better to just wait for 2 weeks and see what the total pot of money is, and then determine all those projects.
This isn't
Instead of just
part-
voting on
well,
one. I mean, that's fine, we can vote on one, but
I'd like to vote on this one after speaking to the
put the motion
facilities
on the floor,
director.
please.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? A second. Sarah's seconding.
What it's gonna be called. What do you need to go out to bid?
Boiler replacement, boiler, yes, exactly. Come on up,
Please.
sir.
Sorry.
Inviting Mr. Gary up to answer questions.
Sure. Can answer,
What
Anything.
do you need to enable yourself to go out to bid for this?
well, no, because the price exceeds $10,000.
Yep.
We need to do a sealed bid process.
Right.
So this would put it, if approved tonight, I can get it on the street tomorrow. It's already written, the specification, advertised for a week, and that's sending it out to all the suppliers. and purchase it. We have an in-house plumber, perfectly capable with our team of installing it, so that's a savings to the district. And Pollard will have heat next winter if we act on it.
Other questions about the need for the boiler? Sean?
Didn't we have, like, in the fall, when we were going through all the budget stuff, that, you know, or actually it was more towards the ending process, that the whole assessment of our heating throughout the district came about?
Sure.
So what were the other outcomes of the other facilities? And I think this is more in line with what Kim's asking.
Yep.
Is that we might want to look at other facilities that we basically might have put Band-Aids on to address that particular issue at that time. This, I'm assuming, is the worst of the worst and is getting addressed first, which I think it should.
Brokenest of the worst.
This is certainly the worst of the worst because it's gone,
Working.
right? We've already taken it out because it's broken. The other schools have adequate heating systems right now, so we want to make sure that all of our schools are heated next winter, and that's why we brought the Pollard boiler to the facilities committee.
I think what Sean said, you brought that, but you also brought to the board,
You had him do a list.
yeah,
You
there was
asked him
like a
for
priority type
an
list.
Yeah, and this
inventory.
was, this was at the top at that time.
Absolutely, it was
It
not even
wasn't
functional,
top.
wasn't even functional at that time.
Right,
So
this was back in the
it's
winter.
top
That's
bottom,
what
however you
started
want
the
to look at it.
list.
So it doesn't, it's there, but it wasn't there, it doesn't even work, so.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's, I follow the drift, what's going on here, but, so it's, I don't believe that that's a fair and honest appraisal to sit back, because less than 6 months ago, there was, I think, 8 boilers that were at different stages of replacement repair. And now I'm hearing there's 1. Now, Pollard's a given, that just hasn't, that hasn't even functioned.
That's all we're asking for right now.
I understand, okay.
Dan?
Could we ask our in-house plumber to reevaluate the heating systems in each school before the winter?
Of course. Yeah, he has already
And then just
performed that
update
work.
facilities
Sure.
and I'll
Yeah,
bring it back
update,
here.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I
Check out
came
the
to the board and
facilities.
reported that, you know, we needed to act on every single school. I mean, Pollard was top priority
Yeah,
at that time.
Right.
I'd like to see our plumber to go through each school over the summer and give facilities an update on the heating systems at each school so that we can
Yeah.
bring it back.
Yeah, of course.
And that way everybody.
We'll be doing a
knows.
lot of preventive maintenance during that time anyways.
Right.
So,
So, yeah, Brian.
So, after we vote on I'd like to stay on topic on facilities. I want to talk.
Sure, sure. So I'm going to call for a vote then. This is to expend or put out to bids, quotes.
right, it was really to defer the window project, right?
Yeah, defer the window project.
And use the
that money
funding to
for-
buy the boiler, is what the recommendation of the committee was.
We don't have enough money to do the window project. Okay? Put a boiler in at Pollard School, hopefully. Okay. All in favor? Unanimous? Something else on facilities, Brian?
Thinking how, let's see, Angela was here, superintendent's here, and Tom, if you could sit right there. It came up at that facilities meeting about the track.
Yeah.
I spoke to the Busbys. Apparently, the Busby family built the track in the 90s, and then Busby and Brock's did reclaimed it and resurfaced the whole thing in 2005.
Yep.
So my question is, because when the AD came in and made an announcement, so do we have did some kind of civil engineer, did someone outside firm something came in and say you can't use this?
Right now, our children, our students, community are still using the track. What we did is we canceled the meets because the surface, the track surface is delaminated from the asphalt. Every time we get heavy rains, blaring sun, it makes it bubbling. It bubbles up. So I think, I don't want to speak for Angelo, but it's hard for him to plan home meets without knowing the condition of the track.
Okay, well, but I'm not asking for the athletic opinion of this. What I'm trying to get.
I've had 3 vendors come out in the
That's
past
what
2
I'm
weeks.
looking for,
Yeah.
because I think what we're needing is in full disclosure, I'm good friends of the Busbys, and Paul, the Timberland grad, was down here 2 nights ago walking the track. And he's given me the whole structure, how this thing is built and the history of this thing. And he'd like to know if there's something they can do and they know what's going on. So I said, well, I will ask the powers to be because I know the athletic director did just get up one morning and just look up at the sun and just say, I don't think we're going to have any more. There's something that triggered that.
Sure.
And so whether it was some kind of PE, someone came down here, I'm assuming, and I think, and the reason I'm bringing this up is as you're getting into this time of the year, if there's something that can be done, that's kind of a key
Yep.
facility. There's a lot of athletes that are used so that's, I think.
Yeah, well, Dan, where did we, to bring it back to the meeting, where did you leave it in the meeting, at the facilities meeting, that?
We were gonna
Tom
get
was-
pricing on
Tom
it.
was gonna get some prices, because
Sure.
we need to
Don't
talk
know
about
the
whether or not
numbers
it's
or
gonna be
whatever.
anything we can do.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the latest and greatest number.
Well, can I just?
Sure.
So, just so everybody knows, it started in the fall of 2012. We were talking about replacing the track in 2012. And then there has been Band-Aid repairs, right, over the last 6 years. This year, some winters are worse than others. But that talk has been kind of going on for quite some time. It was going on before I got here, that track needed to be replaced. There's concerns, and they did pieces of it, right? Am I
Right.
correct?
Little piece.
So that was decisions that were made by the facilities committee. Instead of replacing the track, no, we can just do a part of it, we can do this piece, whatever. And that's been every year, really. And so this year, I was as surprised as anybody else, like, okay, now we can't use it, right? So that's probably a good, yeah, would you please? Yeah.
Thank you. At the facilities meeting, the way I try to explain where we were for this short-term, this year piece, was we originally, at the high school level, did not have any home meets scheduled for this season. We were asked at the start of the season, when a different school could not host, early in the season before anything started, I said, we can try to host. When we got the weather that we got, the track has not been great, we know all that, but you can walk the track, you can practice on the track, it's not going anywhere. However, we got heavy rain, and then we got, great sun and heat, and the bubbles were pretty pronounced. At that time, I had about a half a week, maybe a week, before the meet was going to happen. And at that point in time, I couldn't take the chance of saying to 2 other schools, plus my own school, probably a grand total of over 200 kids, I don't want to call you the day of and say, hey, we can't come here, the meet's canceled. In the world I live in, I can't do that. They have buses, we have officials. So I said, listen, can someone else hold this meet? We'll know we'll have it. I'll get a bus and come to you. The kids won't suffer. None of the kids will suffer. So my reasoning on it was, as an AD, I had time to be able to make this meet happen for 3 schools and not worry about if it was going to rain or be too hot or whatever else. So to me, it was a simple decision. We had the meet. Another school hosted it. It worked out well for all the kids.
Are the middle school meets still happening on the track?
We moved them because now we had more time. And again, we're in the same boat. We're not sure what the weather's going to be. The spring has been a horror show. So I contacted the middle school people and said, hey, let's get these kids meets. Let's make sure that I don't have to cancel something on them at the 11th hour. So we've rescheduled things for them, and the meets are happening.
So the meets are happening, they're just not on our track.
Yeah, I'm not going to create a situation where I'm going to call 2 or 3 schools
At the last minute.
at the last minute and say, you know what, it's not conducive to run today. I'm not going to do that. So that's kind of where my decisions were. It wasn't so much that you can't walk the track or anything like that, but we have too many kids to be worrying about at the 11th hour to cancel something.
So is our pricing to repair or replace right now, or is it options?
The vendors that we've brought, and, Angelo's walked with me, right now, there really isn't a repair. I mean, it's in the replacement stage. It's at end of life, so, right now, the only thing that's holding down that track surface is the weight of the surface itself. There's no glue or adhesive really holding it in areas.
Brian?
So the track life is only 12 years. It was all brand new in 2005. Over close to 20 inches of, there was 4 to 6 inches of processed gravel, then bank run gravel. It's built like a road. And from what I understand, the history of this place is, this was a mountain of sand. And they took and sold the sand in the 90s, and that's how they built the field. And so the receiving soil there, which is good, is sandy, where it's probably behind the middle school is more clay. But the soils down there are better than behind the middle school. So I guess we all live in homes with roads. When you build a road, you should get like more than 12 years out of a road.
Yeah, I don't think the subsurface is in question. It's the track surface on
Okay.
top of the asphalt. So when we've had the vendors walk around, the subsurface, they're actually amazed at the condition of the track.
Is our track the same track that, say, Salem has and Concord has, and where all our kids go to other meets? Or is this a different kind of track?
There are varying materials all throughout the state. There's a polyurethane, there's also like a latex track. Right now, we have a latex track.
Well, let's see what we've got for some numbers. I mean, we need to find out what these experts are saying. As long as our kids have their meets,
Yeah, every vendor has been consistent in saying that there is no Band-Aid repair. There's no repair we can make to get by. We're at the end of life of the track. We've got our money's worth. It's time to
do something.
replace.
Could I ask you, could you get in touch with Busby? Because I think Busby and Brock's, were they one of the vendors? I mean, the local, I think they'd be pretty good people to talk to.
No, yeah, and absolutely. We would include them on the subsurface of that. But right now, we're talking with the track, the people that install the rubber track on top.
That was Brock's last time.
Okay, yep, they
It's
weren't
Dr.
on my
Metzler's
list
point.
of.
These things, probably every 10 years they change. What is the thing to have in a
Sure.
public school in 2018?
Sure.
Because I remember a lifetime ago when I was at Boston College, watching these people rip up a perfectly good stadium and track. I'm saying, okay, because it wasn't the right one that year. So I know we don't have BC's budget, but
Well, let's see what we get and find out here.
Yeah. Happy to.
Any other committee reports? Yes, Sean, a
I was just
question or
gonna,
a
do we
committee
have
report?
an idea of the not the exposure, but the, to resurface this, are we talking $500,000, $1 million, $3 million? I mean,
Right now, we're in the ballpark of 250 to 325,000.
The same number of lanes,
That is replacing exactly what's there right now.
which we have 6?
We have 6.
Yeah, 6.
Committee reports.
budget last week,
Thanks,
we
Angela.
had a
Thank you, guys.
very productive budget meeting. Jeff gave an excellent tutorial, walking people through the financial reports, and actually there was a lot of good discussion on the sizing of the reports, from legal size to 8.5 by 11s. But anyway, I think everyone walked out of the room last week having a very good idea what's on their reports. So I was in good company, because I thought I was a minority here that was, sitting here reading these things, but they were very, very well done.
When's the next meeting, Brian? Are you,
I think
Continuing to meet?
Mr. Muscola has some subcommittee, and they're working on, they have a little mission they're working on that I think that, I don't
Keep us
honestly know.
posted.
I will keep you posted.
I think the subcommittee is trying to decide how they want the different department heads to
Yes.
present.
Yes.
Could I just on that, the history here. So there is an RSA, it's 3217 maybe, where school board makes the recommendations to the budget committee. The reason I bring that up was, for years, we had, over at the PAC, it was a school board thing where the department heads made a presentation just to the school board. And I always wondered we always did it twice, and so then eventually it didn't make a lot of sense, and then it was one presentation to both the school board and then the budget committee, And the school board kind of stopped participating in that for whatever reason, and then it just became these individual reports to the budget committee. My point being is that I think the budget committee is looking for the school board to endorse the department budgets before they end up in the budget committee's hands. I think that's what they're looking for. Does that?
I don't know that yet. That, I think that
Yeah,
might be
so
in the
let's,
works.
let's see what,
Yes.
see
But
what you
that-
get.
That's the history on it. So this group, in terms of time, think of the time, right, that it took, because a couple of you you've either gone to the budget committee or maybe you're on the budget committee. All the time you sat through all those, this committee, it'd be hard for the school board to do that, and then do it a second time at the, so you may want to reconsider again, one night presentation where all the department heads made their presentations to the school board at like the PAC, and then that would be your recommendation, then they could go to the budget committee. Because if we don't do that, I think we're looking at a lot of time spent on individual, and that's not the lion's share of the budget. We spend a lot of time on this budget, but that's not really of that $71.8 million, that's not a lot, that's not a big percentage of the budget, right? You spend a lot of time on the smallest part, I guess. But I think that's where that's
Brian
going.
comes back from what the budget committee, that subcommittee has to say when they get it all worked out. Anybody else, committee reports? Okay. Reports of the school board, anything? Bennett, anything? Music, a lot of music going on this past week, a lot of music.
Yeah.
Viola.
Yeah. The
Trumpeting.
jazz band the high school jazz band had their concert last night, which is exciting. Next Wednesday is the high school orchestra and the band concert, and they're back to back, so it's 6 and then 7:30. And then there's also going to be some solo ensemble stuff coming up as well, so lots of stuff going up. But the jazz band concert last night was amazing. Catch it on Vimeo, for sure.
Worth seeing if you've missed it. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Correspondence folder's gone, oh, we didn't have a correspondence folder.
I think we got it all, unless you had a handwritten letter.
I don't have a handwritten letter. Vendor and payroll registers appears to be done. Other business, things you want to consider for a future agenda. Kim?
Again, I'm gonna go back to the police. I see it's on the back burner. One thing that I'm wondering is, what is the threat here? Because I have not, as a school board member, been apprised of any threat. So I would like to know what the threat is.
So you'd like that as an agenda item?
I would like to know right now what the threat is before I walk out of this building. I think I deserve that.
They weren't a budget committee.
They weren't a budget committee, so I guess it's not Brian.
Not Brian? What do
It
you
was a
mean?
budget committee and there were no police there,
But I'll be happy to put it on the agenda.
but you're not happy to tell me, walking out, what this threat is that is perceived here. And when we have 2 police officers here,
Stop pointing your
when we
finger.
only have 1 at the high school, and on average, we have almost 1 police call
Point of
a
order.
day.
If you want it on the agenda, I'll put it on there, but I'm not gonna have this,
I did ask for it before, Sue.
and I didn't get it on. We had a pretty long agenda.
Okay.
I'll put it on for next time.
The other thing I asked for, or was voted on January 11th by the board, was to request that the SAU provide the information to NESDEC to obtain a SPED trend report. That has not been done yet. Now, I
Do you want
realize
that on the
you're,
next agenda to discuss that?
I would just like it done. We don't need to discuss it, it was voted on.
We're not gonna have a report that we don't discuss.
No, we need to get the information so that we can get the report to discuss.
We need a report.
No, we need to get the information at least submitted so that we can get the report. My concern is, we haven't even submitted the information in NESDEC, so there's no way we're gonna get a report.
So you don't want it on the agenda, you just want me to work on that?
Yes, yes.
I'll take that under advisement.
The-
Thank you.
The other thing is the self-evaluation questions
The
that we're supposed to do, I think, May 23rd.
school board, the school board evaluation?
Yeah. Where did those questions come from? Where was that survey taken from?
You want that as an agenda item?
No, I'm just asking the question. Some of the questions,
Do you want to
I-
entertain the question?
let me just, some of the questions I can't answer because, and I'm pretty bright. I read these questions and I can't even figure out how to interpret the question to answer it. So that's what I'm asking, because if I could figure out where the survey came from, maybe I can figure out what the question is asking.
Because knowing where the survey comes from
Yes,
would help
it
you
does.
answer the question.
Yes, because they probably have a basis for the survey questions and how they were developed.
I'll ask that question and I'll get back to you. I personally will get back to you on that answer.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing is, during delegate session, we heard that the school board has not appointed somebody that needs to be appointed for the collective bargaining within 30 days. Are we going to get that addressed?
We'll get that addressed. I'll personally tell you I will get that addressed. Other things, Mr. Guide?
If we could jump back to the self-evaluation, the 360.
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to send that out to committee members that serve on the various committees that we serve on? So like, all right, let's just take policy. Whoever's on policy other than Dr. Metzler and the board members to send that evaluation to them as well.
How do you know it isn't already going to them?
It is.
It is
Already
going to
is
them.
going.
What about the members at large that aren't employees of the school? Don't we have some committees that are just, have some members on them?
CIP does.
CIP does, maybe strategic planning does. Do you know what I mean? Sending out, just, I'm not saying sending out to all parents of the school district. I'm saying the ones that are volunteering their time to send it out to them, that aren't employees. Is that
Do you want me to
possible?
explore that?
I'm just, if it's possible. I mean, these people work with us, so they, you know what I mean? I don't know.
It's possible, it's just not very practical at this point.
It's not something we've done in the past, but that doesn't, let me explore that possibility.
Okay.
Jen, did you have something? You had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could maybe get a transportation update or busing update. I'm fielding quite a few calls in my community.
Update.
And I feel like, I know personally, this time of year, every year, there seems to be some busing issues.
We'll see, we'll get that on the next agenda, where we're at. It would be helpful, I'll say, if ahead of time, what specifically, if you either let me know or, and I'll get it to Sandy, what the specific things are that they have concerning, not just big global, but what it is specifically. It would help her be prepared, so she doesn't have to say, I gotta go back and find my answer.
Are you thinking late buses, driver shortage, those things? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've been also approached about those issues.
Okay, so let's see, all right, let's get those specific things, we'll get it to her. And any need for, Mr. Guide,
Motion to adjourn?
is there any need for a non-public? If not, we're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.